Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of the Select Committee on Tribal Relations. Rather than doing roll call, I think we'll have everybody down on our side introduce themselves, and then we'll go to the audience and have people provide introductions as well. It's a nice custom that we've adopted over the years, and we'll do it today again.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Penn, House District 33. So you are sitting in my district right now, and thank you all for coming. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Ken Chestick, House District 13 from the city of Laramie.
Good morning, Representative Ember Oakley, House District 55, pretty much the city of Riverton proper.
Affy Ellis, Senate District 8, which is in Laramie County, Cheyenne.
Cale Case, Senate District 25. I'm from Lander. Thanks for allowing us to come and use this facility. It's really you've been very nice to us. Thank you.
Good morning, Eric Barlow, Senate District 23, and it's another beautiful day here in Fremont County and on the reservation. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for providing some introductions, and a special thanks to our staff. We adjourn the session and then have a scramble to get our interim topics selected and requested and approved. And then it's staff's job to start putting that together, and they do our agenda. And I can tell you, this hearing came up very quickly and they did a wonderful job. State Parks took us around yesterday to Sings Canyon. We got a look at some rock art or rock imagery. We had a question yesterday, a little discussion on why we now call it rock imagery. And the answer we had was that it's a little more inclusive of petroglyphs, which are actually etched in this rock, versus pictographs, which are painted. And so we saw great examples of both yesterday and learned a lot. We might just use the word petroglyph, though, if rock imagery is not up your alley. But I welcome Chairman Sinclair from Eastern Shoshone Business Council, who just joined us. The first topic on our agenda is K-12 education. And I want to give a notice to the committee. we have a presenter from the University of Wyoming, a student who is taking finals. And so she's asked to talk on the higher education topic at 10 a.m. So depending on how this discussion goes, we will break and make sure that we hear from her to accommodate her final schedule. And for those of you who have taken law school exams, just even saying that out loud made me feel like I was going to throw up this morning. So good luck to her. That's always a very stressful morning and a stressful day. So with that, we'll have Department of Education led by Mr. Shaner and Ms. Maloney. Welcome.
Good morning, Chair Ellis and members of the board. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I am Wanda Maloney with the Wyoming Department of Education. This morning, we really have three efforts that we are working on towards supporting student performance across the state. And the first one is outlining some of the work around the statewide system of support. The second one is some literacy efforts that are happening with one elementary school. And then finally, it's looking at some of the work happening around CTE pathways to further support the Hathaway Scholarship. So this morning, I'll take the first two, and then I know our Chief of Staff and Dr. Wells will cover the Hathaway Scholarship work that's happening. So when we look at the statewide system of support, it's really designed to support those schools who are not meeting and partially meeting. And so when you look at our accountability model, each of the districts and schools have to take the state assessment. And we look at our accountability model, and it has a lot of different indicators in it. And so at the final conclusion of that, they do receive a rating. And the rating is either exceeding, meeting, not meeting, or partially meeting. And so for those schools that are partially meeting or not meeting, that's where the statewide system of support comes into place. And each of those schools needs to write improvement plans, school improvement plans. So the statewide system of support, we have a team that goes out and they need to write those plans to address it to any of the deficits. So for example, if their school improvement shows that they need to work on graduation rates, or it shows they need to work on achievement, they would need to factor that into their school improvement plan. We actually go on site and support those schools with looking at research-based strategies. We look at some of the efforts, we look at the data, and our team has made 2 visits, and they also do a virtual visit to support. The other thing that we are doing around the statewide system of support is professional development. So we have 2 big initiatives that are supporting the districts here. The first one is professional learning communities. You're probably familiar with it. It really is bringing collaborative groups of teachers together to look at 4 main things. What is it we want students to know and be able to do? How do we know if they can do that? What do we do if they can't do the things we're asking them to do? And then finally, what do we do if kids are exceeding those measures that we've set for them? So it really sets 4 big goals. It helps teams of teachers look at their data, make sure that they're meeting those goals. The other initiative that the state is working on is MTSS, Multi-Tiered System of Support. And so what that is it really has 4 components. Multi-tiered system of support really looks at those kids who might be falling through the cracks that need extra support. So the first thing they do is they screen to find those students who may be struggling, and it's both academically and it could be behaviorally. And then they look at progress monitoring. And then finally, they look at some of the multi-tiered initiatives or the research-based strategies they have in place. And then finally, they look at database decision-making to make sure that what they're doing is making an impact. So those are 2 big levers that each of the districts here. And if you look on page 2, you will notice that Fremont 21, 38, and 14, all of the schools are engaged in the work around professional learning communities. They've all received technical support from the department. And they also are engaging in multi-tiered system of support. And Fremont 14 is also engaging with having a coach trained in every school. So that's something that is looking at sustainability. They've got somebody on the ground that really knows how to support their schools and look at data to make decisions. The other effort then that the department is working on, and just to finish up, to close up the statewide system of support, one of the things we'll be moving forward, along with the on-site visits that we do to support each of the schools, is we will additionally be doing more wraparound support. So when we go out to visit the schools, we'll be looking at, should a special education representative come along? Should someone from our literacy team come with us? Should we have someone from finance? So looking at really just wraparound supports for that district. And that will start in the fall. The second thing that's happening with the schools, and this one actually is around Arapahoe 38 in the elementary, and they have been working on their literacy. And so Region 11 Comprehensive Center and the University of Wyoming have partnered together to come on site and look at professional development around writing. They specifically selected that goal, and they're looking around evidence-based practices for writing, and they have engaged with the 6-trait model. The 6-trait model really identifies components. And I think one of the things that they've done is they've looked carefully at what do they see that their students need. And they have noticed, and this is actually a 5-year effort, they're on year number 4 in this work, and they have noticed several increases. One around the teacher's knowledge at the elementary, one around having access to materials and resources. And then next, they've looked at school policy. So recreating the 6-trait model is something that they use as a tool, and then also looking at the statewide assessment and understanding that rubric to help students write. And then finally, what they noticed is that leaders noticed an increase in students' enthusiasm, their confidence, and their growth in the students in areas of literacy. So those are 2 big efforts that are happening. And I'll just cover briefly the Hathaway Scholarship work, and that's the third one that our Chief of Staff and Dr. Wells will cover. But really, it's looking collaboratively at our secondary students and saying, what can we do to streamline pathways for our students as they have interests in career and technical education? How can we support them to have more access to gaining the funds and helping them graduate, helping them to be successful as they move into their career of choice? And with that, I'll stand for any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you. Questions from committee members? Representative Penn?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Looking back, when you were talking about the professional learning communities, and you said that there is a coach, an MTSS coach training. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? Are these schools selecting someone that's already within the facility, that someone from WDE comes in and trains, or do you send someone that comes in as the coach, or how does that work?
Ms. Maloney?
Thank you, Chairman Ellis and Representative Penn. Absolutely. So it's a couple of things. So we do have vendors that support us in doing that. So the professional learning communities, we do contract with somebody who specializes in that training. We also do the same with the MTSS, somebody who is an expert who understands all the nuances, who provides that training. But in addition to having a vendor provide that, we have a representative from the department that is also attending and supporting to make sure that we can tailor it to meet the needs of each of the districts and the schools. Thank you.
Further questions? I want to talk about the multi-tiered systems of support and you made the comment that you are looking for students who are falling through the cracks and have certain screening mechanisms that focus on academic and behavioral concerns. Can you just maybe put a finer point on what that means and how that's addressed? I think, certainly if a student needs like additional interventions on reading time, I think that makes sense to me of how you achieve that. And I understand how you can make those improvements, but on some of the other issues, particularly behavior, I know that's an area where we don't necessarily have enough hands on deck to provide maybe some of the emotional support or behavioral support that children need. So if you could walk us through how successful that is, if that's understaffed, and just help us educate us on that particular piece of your comments.
Madam Chair, I can speak just a little bit to that in terms, I think that the schools can speak most clearly to the efforts that they have in place specifically. I know there's a variety of screeners that they can use to do that. And so I would think that would best be served by each of the schools to speak about how that's working and which screeners they're using and supporting students on the academic side.
Follow-up? I'd like to have some follow-up. Yes, I may. Thank you. Along the lines of the screeners, though, on the literacy piece, the department, though, I think through some rulemaking or some guidance, has allowed districts to use a couple of different screeners. Just remind me how that works. And committee, just so you're aware, this has been an ongoing effort in your education committee about the appropriateness of certain screening tools that are used. There are some who believe that some screeners are inadequate and that don't catch the reading deficiencies. But, districts spend money on these screening tools. And so there's a little bit of a rub there on how many screeners we allow. And unfortunately, if we have multiple screeners, it doesn't provide an apples to apples comparison when you're looking at what these screeners are catching throughout the district. So just a little background on that, but can you remind me how the department has managed that?
Madam Chair, the department has been working over that over the course of the last year, really putting a committee together and looking at all of the components, looking at evidence-based decisions to put together screeners. They have come up with criteria, and I know there are more than one that is allowable. They have several that are outlined in rules that meet the criteria, and districts are working closely with our literacy team to make sure that what they're choosing and what they're implementing, like you said, is systematic so that we have results that are somewhat able to be measured across schools.
Thank you. And we had a nice discussion about it, but I can tell you this is a hotly debated and very controversial topic, the screening tools. Any other questions for Ms. Maloney? Ms. Penn or Representative Penn?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ms. Maloney, when you were talking about, we're talking about schools that are partially meeting or not meeting the status requirements. And last interim, we had these similar discussions, and these schools get put on plans of assistance or things like that. And I'm guessing that's kind of what we're talking about here. So extra support, extra funds to accomplish these things. And last time I posed the question, what happens if we don't see improvement? And it sounded like there wasn't really a lot of accountability if we're implementing all these plans for improvement and we're not moving the needle in the right direction. It sounded like it was just kind of like, well, it is what it is. Has there been any more thought or discussion on ways to increase accountability, on ensuring that we're making it somewhere?
Ms. Maloney?
Madam Chair, Representative Penn, one of the things I can tell you, if we have a school in Chapter 6 rules that is not meeting for the course of 3 consecutive years, their accreditation can be lowered. So that is something that the state board looks at closely too. And so that is a consequence. And that is a label that is put on those schools and does reflect on the community. But again, when we look at that at the department, we're always looking to support and provide resources too. We recognize that there's a variety of challenges. And so that is why we are on site trying to do what we can to support and put resources in place.
Follow up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you ever, as the department, is there any interaction or involvement with the school boards? Any discussions that way, saying we've been implementing these plans, these are what we're seeing are outcomes, and involving the school boards to ensure that they're understanding the full scope of what's happening?
Ms. Maloney?
Madam Chair, Representative Penn, so for each of the school improvement plans that they have to fill out, the board chair does need to sign off on those plans, and they are submitted to the state. And we see that they've signed off, and if invited, we would come and speak to school boards if that would be a support, but they are aware of the school improvement plans. Thank you.
Other follow-up?
Thank you. One little follow-up. And are they made aware of if the improvement plans are, I guess the word not successful, if we're not achieving goals that we identified, is there a way to know that the school board is aware of that as well?
Ms. Maloney?
Madam Chair, Representative Penn, I would believe that that would be something that the district works closely with their board to inform them about the progress that they make. That isn't something that directly we reach out to the board to let them know. It's really served through their accreditation status or their school improvement plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Maloney? Seeing none, thank you so much. The next people we have on our agenda are Dr. Emily Smiley, Assistant Superintendent of Instruction from Fremont County School District 14, and your group, if you wanted to come up together, Mr. Holbert, Ms. Smith from District 38 and District 21 respectively, welcome. And if my agenda is incomplete, I'm just reading off a list. If you're part of this group, please feel free to join us at the table. Oh, and
This looks like a good day to get in trouble with the school.
I think I think I might have skipped over Kathy Wells from Academic Affairs at Central Wyoming College. We'll just reverse the order and apologize for that, but I think this will be fine since we've got everybody up there. Just a reminder, when you speak on the mic, turn on the button, you'll see a green light turn on. And then for the record, before you speak, just introduce or let us know who you are. And then all questions come through the chairperson. So with that, who would like to go first? Okay, welcome.
Madam Chair, my name is Stephanie Zigafus, Superintendent of Fremont 14. Apologize, there was some clerical errors on the agenda there. So I'm excited to be able to respond to some of the questions that were asked previously, and we have some of it in our presentation. I'm not sure if you have the slideshow available for the public to put up. That's our, I'll go ahead and get started if you don't mind, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, we'd like to start with addressing multi-tiered systems of support and what we're doing in Fremont County for that. Some of this is, there's a little redundancy from last time we were here, but we're here to state what progress we've made throughout the year on this. And we hired an MTSS coordinator with our ESSER funds 2 years ago. This is our second year. We're fortunate and then we've been able to obtain another grant through WDE that will allow us to support this position for an additional 2 years, which will be very beneficial. We've seen great success with the position and the building of the teams from the training and the planning with students, the data digs that we do, but also the accountability for our staff to be consistent with implementation of multi-tiered systems of support. It's easy to have a framework and say that you can do it, but without that one person dedicated to that mission within all of our buildings and making sure that we're doing it with fidelity, it can be challenging. So this position, we're seeing huge dividends for our students with this. Part of MTSS, if you're not familiar, is the screening of our students. For academic screening, we use the FastBridge, but we also do additional screening. And to respond to previous questions, we use SABRS, which is a social emotional academic screener. It's a real quick screener, but it gives us a good indicator if our students are at risk or high risk. And sometimes we don't always know that because some students will internalize those issues and they're not always overt in the classroom that we're not seeing those. So we do that initially, probably about 6 to 8 weeks into the school year, and we can do it again as well. That has given us some great feedback. And then it's what do we do with that feedback, both with our academic screeners, with our social emotional screener. We use Olveus Bully Prevention Program, and there's a survey that students take in there as well about the bullying that goes on in the school. Do they feel safe in their environment? All of those. So we have great screeners in place. What we're now doing is doing something with that data, and that's the important piece. So the data teams, which include all of our instructional staff, teachers, paras, along with the instructional facilitators and MTSS coordinator, come together. And they meet weekly, and they look at those tier 2, tier 3 students, those students that are at risk and more high risk. And what are we doing, whether it's academic, social, emotional, behavioral, what is it that they need? And then we revisit that. How are they making progress? And, you know, initially we're seeing great progress. I'd love to come back in the fall and report what we had this year with that attention to academic achievement, social, emotional, wraparound services for our students. You know, we're seeing some double-digit improvement initially in our progress monitoring from beginning of the year to the end of the year in reading. So we see that it really pays dividends in those areas that we're focusing on with reading and math. So I'd love to be invited back for us to really share that and give you our official data, but that's great. We also
I
do.
appreciate that. Can I interrupt you for
Yeah,
one
sure.
moment? On the screeners, one thing that we always hear in the legislature is there's not enough time in the day. The teachers' plates are full. These screeners are not meant to be tests, but they're supposed to be screening tools that are used really efficiently and quickly. I'm familiar with FastBridge, but I'm not on Savers, the social and emotional. Can you talk about just how much time that takes to administer to each student, and give us a sense of what it asks, or what are some of the indicators that a student might have some problems that need to be addressed?
So it asks a variety of different questions on that. It really is a quick screener. I mean, probably 10 minutes at the most, maybe, for a student. I can't remember how many questions are on there. But what it does is it gives us feedback as to, you know, how that student's feeling. How do they feel in school? How are they feeling they're achieving academically? Like, what's their, you know, self-efficacy of how they do academically? Are there problems going on that they haven't talked about? Do they have one person at school, an adult that they can talk to? It's those types of questions. So it really is just a screener, but what it allows is our counselors to be able to follow up on those students. Also, for those that may come out high risk or even at risk, to follow up with our parents. Is there something going on at home that we're unaware of? How can we support this child? So it puts eyes on that student, which we may not have, because again, some students will internalize that or they won't tell anyone. If they don't have an adult at school that they're not comfortable with, we may not know about it, right? So it helps us just be able to look at that child and say, okay, we need to have eyes on them. We need to have some conversations. What can we do to support them, right? Who is their friend group? Do they have a friend group? What's their attendance like? That's been a big focus for us, is
Thank you.
attendance this year.
Please continue.
Dr. Smiley?
Madam Chair, part of our ongoing efforts are to increase attendance and reduce chronic absenteeism. And we've kind of taken a multi-pronged approach to this. We know from the research that especially with Native American students, if they have a sense of belonging, they're more likely to come to school, and we'll have more time to teach them reading and math. So we've been working to come up with a culturally responsive PBIS framework, working with Dr. Wetzel out of Montana, and our elders have been working with some of our teachers and counselors to really make our positive behavior intervention system more adept at our students, more targeted our students and their families and their traditions and traditional ways. We have worked on indigenizing our classrooms and other spaces, because there's also research out there. If you have a good sense of belonging and you see yourself in that area and you're comfortable in that area, you are more open to learning your reading and math. We've also developed partnerships with Northern Arapahoe White Buffalo Youth Program, Eastern Shoshone Recovery, Wind River Cares, the IHS Teen Clinic, because if you are not healthy emotionally and physically, again, it's hard to learn. So kind of providing some of those wraparound services in the schools. We have, they provide extra counseling and therapeutic services that our in-house counselors may not have the time or expertise to provide. And we're also received a small grant to help indigenize the social and emotional learning. We purchased some books and just had kind of the kick up of that recently. So culture is prevention. So we're really trying to make sure they have the supports if they have substance abuse challenges or vaping as an issue. How do we provide cessation services, rather than punitive behavior consequences? Like, how do we help them address those issues as well?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, just to touch on that too, is attendance. And I mentioned this last time we were here to speak with you, but attendance is a huge issue on the reservation. I think I could speak for all three of our schools. It's a battle. It's an ongoing battle because if kids don't come to school, they can't learn. No matter what we have in place for them, if they're not coming to school, they can't learn. So for us this year, it was a non-negotiable. Every building would have an attendance team and they'd meet weekly. And it's to look a separate team with the counselor. We have behavior support staff in there, the principal. They need to figure out, why are our students, some of them, not coming to school? And they've done that this year. It's been great. We are seeing an increase in attendance. We're just celebrating our 6th grade class having 90% attendance for the whole month of July. And I mean, that gives me shivers because our attendance is sometimes in the 70s. So that's a huge celebration, and it's really helping our staff to focus on, what does this student need? How do we keep school engaging for them? That is where, if there was a request, for our district, is more of that community support. How can we help incentivize and support our families to get kids to school? Not make them feel that it's a penalty, because that doesn't work. We know the truancy reports going to the tribal courts isn't effective. But how can we help get our kids to school where the parents are partners with us, right? The guardians, the grandmas, the grandpas, whoever's taking care of that child. How can we get our students there? Because I think as a school, we're doing everything we can to do that. But we need more community communication on how to get that done. Because once they come to us, they learn. They can learn and they can succeed. So,
Chairman,
Senator Case?
pardon me, Madam Superintendent, but I may have misheard you, but I thought you said 90% attendance for the month of July.
for April.
Oh, okay.
Excuse me if I misspoke, but yes,
Well,
April.
I don't know.
I know.
I'm not sure. I sometimes hear things.
That's easy, Rhoda.
I was thinking, wow, I got to think about that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I would like to ask a question. So you mentioned that that's an elementary school statistic. And this committee, years ago, we undertook a pretty big effort to try and revise our attendance laws and policies. And one of the distinctions we tried to make was, what's the difference between, a habitual truant versus, a parent who's not getting their kid to school. Do you have some information about why kids are missing? And I'm guessing you're K through 6, K through 8. It's more parent based. But I'm curious to know if you're keeping track of why kids are missing, if they're skipping school, or if it's mom and dad or their guardians not getting them there.
We do keep track of that. To be honest with you, we don't dig we do dig deeply because our goal is to get them to school. So it's a variety of reasons, and the reasons can change from month to month depending on what that family is experiencing. And you are right, as they get into more secondary, sometimes it's the student and not wanting to come to school. We always look at, is there bullying going on? What are the reasons? Trying to address that with the child. The elementary works really hard at getting the parents on board with them. They send out positive attendance letters. Here, we notice your child hasn't been here for 4 days. How can we help? What can we do to get them here? So we're really trying that approach of support and welcoming them when they come in, along with our parents, so that they don't feel that reentry for students that have missed 5 days, 6 days, 10 days is really difficult and anxiety ridden for them as they walk back into a school being 10 days behind. So trying to flip that so that kids feel welcome when they come. I will say our elementary is being very successful with that. Their attendance is going up, and we're seeing then the results of that, our reading scores are going up significantly too. So I hope, Madam Chair, that answered your question.
It did. I mean, I always like numbers and data, but I get that that's not maybe right here, right now. A follow-up question to that, though, is one thing in working on that attendance statute, and was the hope that our districts would take to heart changing some of their policies. And one thing we heard specifically from the Fremont County schools is that Native children, when they have to go to funerals, those are a little bit lengthier in time and not necessarily, that's not necessarily reflected in absenteeism policy. And as someone with children, I can tell you my school district is really unrelenting when it came to pulling my kids out when both my parents died, and it was awful. And they were not welcome back, and they were behind. And I think my daughter's, one of her teachers said, well, she can check Canvas while we're trying to be at a funeral. So anyway, along those lines, can you talk a little bit about your culture? And do you know if your policies have been adjusted or reflect some of those cultural differences to allow for maybe lengthier periods of absences for Indigenous students to attend things like funeral ceremonies and other things like that?
Yes, Madam Chair. We do. I feel like we're very sensitive to family issues and issues like funerals and things that go on, and maybe trauma that they're experiencing at that time, homelessness, items like that. So we do abide by our state statutes, which is the drop of 10 after 10 days, but we make it really easy for them to re-enter. Let's say they are gone more than 10 days, which does happen frequently. That communication is there. We know that we're going to have to drop them from our books, but they don't need to necessarily know that, right? Like we re-enroll them when they come back on day 11, 12. We make sure we stay in touch with them. We did adopt the recommended policies that we had at that time when the legislature made those changes with truancy. We try to walk that fine line between that balance of understanding why a child's gone. Is that chronic absenteeism due to something traumatic, an experience that's happened, or is it due to a habit that's developed and we need to work on getting them back into the school? Is there a reason? What's the reason they don't want to come to school? You know, sometimes it's engagement, and you'll see a little later in the report, we have found one of those hooks for kids, and that's our CTE and our CTE concentrators. Our students that go through our CTE concentrators, which is a series of some of those CTE classes, we had a 92% graduation rate with those students. And a 79%, I'm stealing Dr. Smiley's thunder, but it's exciting, a 79% employability or college rate for those students after they graduated. So we know where some of those hooks are. Engagement's a big piece. School has to be purposeful, which sometimes ties into attendance too.
Thank you for the pause. Please continue with your presentation.
If you could scroll up to the next slide. I just want to bring up, we do have a video. It's very authentic. We do board celebration, so our board does understand what's going on in our buildings. And you don't need to show this now. It's about 6 minutes. I know you probably don't have time for that, but I would ask that if you get a minute, if you can show it or you can watch it, it just really shows authentically what we're doing in our school at our elementary. And this was just recently as of I think we showed this on our April board meeting. So just wanted to add that in there. And then Dr. Smiley will talk about reading math.
Alyssa, do we have the capability of watching that right now? I think there's some interest from my fellow committee members with the link. Okay.
Let's try.
Yes.
Senator Barlow?
Madam Chairman, thank you. Good to see you, Superintendent Zickafoos. So my question is, when you talk about this dropping of students, it seems to have an impact on ADM, which would have an impact on funding. So could you speak to that, the fiscal impact of this challenge with attendance and this back and forth? I mean, I don't know if there's details you want to provide, but it seems like it'd have to have an impact. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Ms. Zickafoos?
Yes, Madam Chair and Senator Barlow, I don't have numbers for you because, to be honest with you, it's just a part of what we do. It does have a funding impact, and it's not that it isn't important or critical. That's obviously one of the reasons, not the primary reason of getting our kids to school, right? We just want them there to learn. It's a secondary issue because it does affect our funding, definitely. I don't know that we have a lot of control over how that works. Does that make sense? Like it just is what it is for us. We know we're losing funding when kids don't come to school. But honestly, from my seat, I don't focus in on that as much as I do getting our kids to school so we can get them learning. That is my primary focus. I don't know that I have a lot of control over that as a superintendent outside of trying to get them to school.
Follow up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate that where your concentration is. I guess what I'm saying, the system itself creates this when you have this particular type of challenge, et cetera. So I guess my question is maybe that's something that we put some thought to or is there some kind of an adjustment mechanism or something when we have these things that are beyond your control, beyond our understanding, and maybe there's something we do there, because if we starve you for resources, that doesn't help you actually serve the students when they come back. And I'm not saying we're getting starved, Madam Chairman. I just don't know what the impact is, and maybe that'd be something we follow up on. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
I would agree with that. Senator Barlow, follow up?
Yes, Madam Chair, Senator Barlow, there is one other item that we haven't used extensively because it's not really effective. If a child is to leave for a funeral or a tragedy or something of that sort, we do have, or they're ill, we do have the opportunity to do temporary virtual school with those students. And that has opened the door to some opportunity that we can still count them. If they're participating. The difficulty is when you, just as you said, Madam Chair, if you are at a funeral, if you are at services, if you're with your family, focused on your family, to ask children to do that at that time may not be real sensitive to the situation. But we do have that opportunity for students that are sick or that they need to be home for an extended period of time. So that legislature has really opened the door for schools and given us just another avenue to use when it's appropriate.
Thank you. How's the video coming, or is it? We can keep moving along and take on another slide. Oh, we have a question from Representative Penn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So, kind of going back a bit, but there was brief mention, I think Dr. Smiley mentioned, now I can't remember which one of you it was, but anyway, elders being involved in the schools. And I know that there's grandparent programs in some of the schools. I'm not sure if they're in all of the schools, but I know that that's a concern of the business council about getting elders in the schools. Could you just speak to that?
Ladies?
So we have a grandparent in each school. They come in between probably 15 to 20 hours a week. We have to also respect their health and their ability to come in, but we have an office set up for them. The students can go down and meet with them if they needed some extra TLC, they have questions about things. They'll talk about traditional ways with them. Sometimes the grandparents will go out and go into the classrooms and meet with them, but we do have grandparents on site. We have a couple rotating through the middle school and one in each of the other schools.
Madam Chair, Representative Penn, just to add to that, we do have it budgeted though to have 2 grandparents in each building. We just haven't gotten to that point where we've had the grandparents available to do that. So we have tried to make that a program that can be systemic throughout the course of a day for students that may need that support. We're just not quite there yet.
Follow up, Representative Penn?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, woman. So are they involved? You mentioned attendance teams, kind of looking at why they're not coming, or counseling individual students who have attendance difficulties. Do the grandparents get involved in that at all? I'm just thinking, I remember back at our previous meeting, Mr. Maldonado, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think he hit the nail on the head. He told us before, this is an issue that often we can't fix here because this is an issue that starts at home and it starts within the community. And so I'm just wondering if there's a way, maybe through use of the grandparent program, and maybe these things are already happening, to try to pull in that community component, if the elders can help coordinate those types of things. Is there, I guess, maybe just your thoughts on that? Thank you.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Representative Penn, that is one of the things our grandparents do is making those connections. As I said, reentry is anxiety ridden for kids if they've been gone extended periods of time, and having that familiarity, having somebody there that can nurture them and care for them and listen to them. You know, there are times if we have a student coming in agitated, they've been gone for a period of time, we will have them see the grandparent, which can kind of de-escalate them, bring them down, kind of refocus them, get them back into the rooms. And that's at all levels. So that is one of the ways we try to utilize our grandparents to assist our students. They're just available. If a student's having a bad day, they can ask a teacher to go visit with the grandparents. So our grandparents all have offices that they have. They're also out there in the commons area at lunch and different times. And that has been really beneficial with behaviorally for our students. It's amazing how they can de-escalate a child and help support that.
Wonder if the Wyoming Senate could get some grandparents.
All righty, we have, if you want to keep moving, I think we're going to keep trying to get this video prepared, but I think we've talked a little bit about reading. And so if you want to move on to some additional slides, math and other academic supports, we can continue on with your presentation.
Madam Chair, just to touch base real quickly on the reading, we have been in, through the Department of Education, they have supported the letters training throughout the state. And we have about 2/3 of our elementary teachers who are in the process or have completed that training. That was a huge benefit. That's a very expensive training, so we appreciate the state for providing that for us.
Is that more phonetic based or whole word language based instruction?
It's really based around the science of reading, so it has all of that in there. It deals with the 5 strands of reading and some other pieces. So it does the phonemic awareness and phonics and fluency, comprehension. So it looks at all of those pieces and how the brain takes on print to speech to print and how different methods and strategies to do the instruction.
Just to follow up, is it whole letter or whole word literacy where kids are encouraged to guess at a word if they don't know what it is? It's the opposite of
It's
that.
the opposite.
Okay, thank you.
But it does include things like morphology. So if you could see the pieces of the word and you know that, you can build up, but not like recognizing the word itself. So we've also been working with integrating informational and narrative text into our monthly cultural learning opportunities. And we've located book houses throughout the community at places like the convenience stores, places where people would wait, like at IHS and so on. And we have free books that go out in the hopes that if children see parents reading for fun, they will want to read for fun. And we have children's books in there so they can read to their students. So we're trying to get more books into the home. We're also working with the University of Wyoming. They're writing a grant right now for to get us more books that we can get out into the community and into our libraries as well. And then moving on to the math, we've been doing math interventions K-12, but this year the high school also adopted a math learning lab to try to help with the struggles that some of our parents have with Algebra 1. So it's probably a good stopping point right
You
there.
can finish your sentence. We'll let you do that.
Sorry. So some of our high school students need more kind of really targeted assistance with certain concepts, not the whole, they just have certain gaps in their knowledge base. So those screening tools, while we do want to not spend too much time assessing, those screening tools are really critical to saying, okay, now that you're in math lab, you 3 need to work on this skill. You're going to go with this teacher or paraprofessional. You 3 need to work on this skill. You're going to go over here. So we do use that data to help drive the instruction and provide the supports.
Thank you. We'll watch the video now. Thank you to this amazing technical team of ours to make that happen.
So we have really gone from our MTSS team from being centered only on the academics to including the whole child.
So our first goal of improving student academic achievement and accountability, when I look at that, I think that's it. That's everything we want to do in a school. We want our kids to live happily ever after, be academically successful, socially, culturally, everything. And a big part of that is attendance.
Attendance is not a new problem. It has been an ongoing problem for years, and there's lots of different, it's kind of like an onion, there's lots of different layers to that. And we've done enormous gains this year in attendance, and I think the best thing that we have done is we've engaged the children into their own attendance, so kids care about coming to school.
Once a week, the attendance team meets and we talk about students who are struggling with attendance. They may be chronically absent. They may have had something come up in their lives that they missed a number of days in a row. We problem solve ways to help them. Could be giving them a phone call. It could be getting an alarm clock. Anything we can do to help them get to school on a regular basis.
We have lots of things going on and to care about. One is the classroom attendance flag. So when all the kids are present in your classroom gets to hang their flag in the hallway. You'll see them all up and down the hallways. And they're beautiful flags. And it's a very, very meaningful way for students and their classes to show off that all their students are there that day.
And then one thing that I think is really neat that we're doing at Wyoming Indian is rewarding kids for perfect attendance for the week. Historically, we used to reward kids in the long term, and it was really hard for kids to meet that goal. And then they felt defeated and couldn't get to those things, but now we're doing it weekly, which every week they have an opportunity to earn a prize at lunchtime. And it's really motivated our kids, and they get to start over every week. So it's a really positive way to get the kids to want to come to school.
On Fridays, we have an extra treat that if you were here all day, every day, you get that in addition to your lunch. Sometimes it's popcorn with M&Ms, sometimes it's a popsicle, a mud cup. We've done all sorts of amazing things, and kids are so excited. You can hear them talking about it every day at lunch. If I'm here 3 more days, I'm gonna get a treat this Friday. The other thing we have done is we do our Celebration Friday assemblies, and we do shout outs and celebration. And after that, we do the randomizer, which is a very exciting time, and we give out 10 free picks out of a goodie bucket. And if you're here that day, you get a prize.
Some of our resources that we have are through River Cares, and it's something called the STARS program. And that program allows us to help with glasses, dental, even like healthcare visits as far as like public health nursing goes.
We also have had the glasses wagon come this year, which we have outfitted 150 students with glasses, and it makes a difference. It really does in kids learning, attendance, all those things come into play with that.
It's had a huge impact. I have 18 students and 16 of them wear glasses. 12 of them do not have them. So our program got 12 students glasses.
Our MTSS Whole Child Committee looked at what foundational school supports need to be in place. And we did definitely see a need for access to food and other basic needs.
So now we've gotten a whole system in place where we have grocery store basically open Thursday and Friday mornings where kids can go and get anything they need.
Kids look forward to it. And they kind of like, for me, it's like they're investing in being responsible for their money. And like you can see that right in their new faces when they go by with their backpacks and their food and stuff. Well, then we also try for our kids and say, hey, you eat this with this, it's good, you know, and they help each other like the food and they know it's good.
Where the store just goes open on Thursdays, and students who want it just go down to the grocery store and they're able to shop. So it's really available for everyone.
We got cheese and I want to be able too. Yeah. With 8 and so it's been really good that they're able to take things into the help with the milk. And those are the two.
This room is our Family and Future Resource Center. It's kind of our hub. This is where we can meet with families. We have winter coats, snow pants, boots, shoes, clothes if kids need to change clothes for the day or even long term.
We've seen a ton of progress made in the areas of clothing, shoes, coats, hats with our clothing closet.
And a lot of that stuff that's been coming is like family. And I think I could do a little bit something that's new, you know, and they're not, you know, ashamed to forget something new. And,
You know, then when they go out to, you know, you see it during winter that they want gloves. They already know come to see you, or you know, that room, they need gloves, and they know that the people, you know, they already know that, you know, stay.
You know, I've seen kids come. The shoes just go,
Mm-hmm.
that's good, you know.
Yeah.
Even if some of them are used, yeah, they can use them, you know.
And it really goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When we take care of those basic human needs, kids want to show up and do well in school, and they can do well in school because they're not worried about being cold at recess or having cold or wet feet or
Thank you for making that happen, and thank you for sharing that video with us. We appreciate it. If you want to continue with your presentation, I'm just looking at the clock. It's about a little after 9:30, so.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, we'll continue and make this quick. I appreciate you taking time to watch that. It just highlights the behind the scenes things that all of our schools do. It's not unique to Fremont 14. I want to make that very known. All of our schools here on the reservation help support our kids with those wraparound services so they can come and learn. Some of the other academic supports that we have really addressed is co-teaching. Were you done with math? Is co-teaching. So co-teaching is really, we focused on not, typically it's special education and gen ed education where we're bringing kids, keeping them in the gen ed setting, and we flood that with services and training for those teachers so they're partner teachers rather than oftentimes the traditional model was we'll take that child down the hall to the special ed room. That didn't work. Research shows it doesn't increase achievement for our students. So having them exposed to the gen ed curriculum with the scaffolded supports, meeting their IEP goals. But we're also doing it with our dual language immersion program. So we've done extensive training. We're finishing year 3 of that training on co-teaching with our DLI teachers as partners, with our gen ed teachers as partners, with our special ed teachers in that same classroom. And the ability to educate the kids along with the language component is tremendous. We're seeing a lot of growth for our students, and especially our students on IEPs as well. And those that may not qualify for an IEP, but they may still be struggling and needing those services. So they get incidental benefit that way. Project-based, place-based learning, CTE, we know that's a hook for our kids. So we integrate a lot of that in all of our buildings. That hands-on learning is often, if they know they're going to do a project that's exciting, they're going to come to school. Freshman Academy, Dr. Smiley touched on that a little bit, as the Freshman Academy, I believe. It is for our freshmen, and it's where we really take some TLC with our freshmen. Because we know if our freshman students become credit deficit that freshman year, the outcomes of them graduating decrease significantly. So if we can keep them being credit ready as a sophomore, entering with their credits they need as a sophomore, we have a greater incidence of graduation for them. And so we've really tried to focus on that this year at the secondary building at the high school. We've also, through the Perkins Grant, again, thank you to WDE and the grants that are available, we have hired a career coach that will work with our students for some work-based or place-based learning for them, work experience as we get that career exploration. Again, having one person dedicated to that, I think will prove itself to be much more beneficial, and we can get a lot farther with our students on what careers they're interested in. Some of our other academic supports are our daily intervention and extension time. Every building has that built into their schedule. If it's not in a schedule, it doesn't happen. So that's part of our schedule. With intensive and enrichment Fridays at the high school. We also have a grant for high-dose tutoring, accelerated learning. That is through ESSER. That will come to a conclusion and sunset at the end of this school year. That has been very beneficial to help our kids catch up a little bit after COVID. and after-school tutoring, and a much more robust summer school program that incorporates place-based learning, but also not just credit recovery. We have that but built in, but we also have, let's go ahead and get ahead on some credits, right? If you do summer school and you attend all of that, you may gain a quarter credit in an area. So we bring our 8th graders, we try to encourage them to come to summer school, and they can actually gain an extra half credit through that summer school program, which, you know, you look at how they feel coming in as a freshman. Wow, I'm a half a credit ahead rather than feeling always behind. So we've tried to do a paradigm shift in that thinking for our students. And then we'll move on. Here is some data on a slide.
Madam Chair, we're still working on improving our graduation rate. Our 4-year rate, the last few years has been around 50%. Our extended graduation rate, though, for last school year was 64%. Sometimes our students face challenges. They may have had a death in the family. They may have gone into the foster care system. They may have had something else happen, but we support them for the next 2 to 3 years until they're 21, whatever it takes. So, and we had those students, we celebrate them at our board meetings. We had 4 students so far this year that completed later, but they completed, and we celebrated them at the board meeting. And Stephanie mentioned earlier that our CTE concentrators, 90 to 100% of our CTE concentrators typically graduate. It's a little low in the 21-22 school year, but that's because those graduates were juniors when they were during COVID and we were virtual. It was hard to offer a lot of CTE courses virtually. It's hard to change a tire or weld if you're virtual. So we really are trying to increase our offerings and do more career coaching and exploration. We also offer dual and concurrent enrollment, and of our 4-year on-time graduating seniors, we run between 25 to 35% typically have taken 1 or more concurrent enrollment classes and passed them. And I know that you had questions about our CTE course eligibility. 25 to 30% of our students typically qualify for the Hathaway Scholarship based on courses. We're working on offering work keys. We went away from that for a while because we were offering so many assessments where it was going into instructional time. So we had to try to find some balance. All of our juniors take the ACT, all of our juniors take the ASVAB test, and we're trying to figure out when do we work the work keys in to help maybe get some of our students more Hathaway eligibility that way.
Oh, that's all.
Sorry. Next slide, please. And along with that career readiness, we also are trying to get more and more of our students to have industry recognized certificates upon graduation. So last year, seniors, we had 17 students, or we had 20, we had quite a few students get their OSHA certification in different areas, guest service school, tourism. We had 15 students. And again, we know that if they have those concentrators, if we look at the 32 students who graduated, whether that was in 4 years or 5, 14 of those were concentrators. And of those, 79% were either in college or at work. And the others were still looking for work as of September or taking a gap year for personal reasons. But we really know that these are important. This year, we've added in some computer science certifications. The students are taking those test exams this year at CWC for cybersecurity and computer science in general and Microsoft Excel. And next year, we'll be adding in the CADX design certification, and we're trying to get the tire industry certification recognized by the state as well.
And just to finish on a celebration, because often we talk about where we're not there yet, but some of our students are doing very well. So the last slide is just the scholarships last year. are in 22-23 that our graduates earned. So that's always, we celebrate that. That's a huge recognition. One area is to make sure we can keep them in school too. So the more we can do in high school without exposure and making them feel comfortable in a college or career setting, I think the greater success we'll have with those outcomes. So thank you for your time, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you. I want to touch really quickly on the Hathaway and college readiness because it segues into our next topic. When you look at the percentage of students taking Hathaway courses, I think 25 to 30% of the students, can you just kind of tease that out a little bit for me? You know, my experience with my kids in school is they're very clear, their high school is very clear on here's your Hathaway pathway that you need to complete if you want to go to the University of Wyoming. Check, check, check. I'm guessing you communicate that to students as well. Or is it just a matter of them not opting in to be on that path? Can you talk a little bit about why those numbers look like that?
Yes, Madam Chair, we really start talking about those pathways and what courses they'll need and the importance of it in 8th grade. So they have and we continue that on through our freshman academy and all 4 years, our counselors and our teachers, we meet with the students on that. Some of that pathway is they'll qualify for the provisional and opportunity. They don't always get through Algebra 2. Some of them will take statistics and probability instead of Algebra 2. So some of it's our math offerings. And the other reason we added the math lab this year, part of the reason for that is if you have to take Algebra 1 multiple times, if you can't pass it without a lot of support, that kind of puts them behind the ball on that. So we're hoping with
you. Any other questions for our presenters? Thank you for that presentation. I know we've got 3 more presenters, so please feel free to introduce yourselves. I don't know how you would like to tackle it, but
I'm Deb Smith. I'm the superintendent at Fremont County 21 in Fort Washakie. Very similar to Superintendent Zickafoos, our schools do very similar things. I wanted to touch on the MTSS. We partner with Solution Tree, and that is a company that is recommended by WDE. So we've had a trainer come in, a coach come in the past 2 years and work intensively with our school, trying to build the capacity to have an MTSS coach. And like Stephanie said, you know, you can have a system in place, but if you don't have that identified person there to help with the consistency, you're really not going to see effects. So we have that in place. We also partner with agency called Wind Culture, specifically to work with our professional learning communities. And we've been partnering with that agency for 3 years now, and we're seeing gains and with each building. We also have staff members that go the extra mile, just like Stephanie said. We make those connections with children, with their families. We have a social worker that spends probably 95% of the time on the road, going to houses, seeing why students aren't there or what the needs are of the family. We've seen an increase in the number of homeless children, specifically that meet the criteria. The federal definition of homelessness would have a lot of our students identified because we have multi-generational homes and families. So we took a look at that as a district and really honed in on, okay, which students are truly homeless, that aren't living with extended family, that do not have a place to live. And we've had an increase over the years since COVID, specifically with a handful of families. And we were lucky to get some ESSERS money to help with that. Of course, it's sunsetting, but we truly targeted that population that meet the McKinney-Vento definition. We do wraparound services similar to what Fremont 14 is doing. We do a lot of reading, a lot of math nights. We do culture nights and things like that. We're really trying to focus on the whole child and not just the academic part. We partner with a behavior specialist that comes in and has been working with our MTSS teams on trying to meet the needs of our students that are acting out. We've hired an additional counselor that we partner with, again, using some ESSER funds. And we're just trying to do the best that we can for our families and their communities. And I'll touch a little bit on the attendance. When we have students or staff out for funerals, it doesn't just affect the students that miss the days because we're such a close-knit community. We have staff that miss as well, and that can affect other students that may or may not be gone for a funeral because the staff member that they might have that connection with is gone for several days. So it is a bigger impact, I would say, than just the single child missing. We do have some great things going on as well. We're doing more project-based learning. At our high school, we have a phenomenal science teacher that has been planning incentive trips, science-based and math-based for students that are on target with their academics. And we've seen some kids make some really good gains in trying to get their work caught up so they can go on this experience. He's taken a trip recently to Moab with students just last week. And there were several students that went and they were really geared about learning about some of the physical characteristics that they were going to see in Moab, as well as just the travel in general and the activities. We've had our students participate in Teton Science School, which I know the other districts do as well. We've had another grade level, 7th grade, got to go to Yellowstone for about 4 days, which is something new to us, an project-based field trip for that grade level, and they're coming back excited. That was with our STEM teacher. So there's a lot of things that we're doing to engage students to come to school, to be more academically focused, and we're hoping to see some good gains. We just finished with the YTOP testing, and when we looked at data in the fall, we had a lot of kids that were on the bubble between basic and proficient. So we're hoping that some of those kids push through the bubble. But I talked with a few of the grade level teachers, and they did say, I've had students that made tremendous gains in math this year. I could see that they grew 50 points or double-digit points. We don't know when the scoring comes if that's enough, but we are seeing progress.
Thank you. Questions from Ms. Smith, Representative Penn?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On the trips that you were just talking about, you say they come back excited and things. Do you know if that translates into better success? And then a second question is, when these kids are going on trips are similar to like sports trips, are we making sure that they're first up to speed on their other classes? Obviously you don't want to be pulling kids out of class who are already behind.
Ms. Smith?
Senator Ellison, Representative, and yes, in order for the kids to go on these academic-based trips, they have to meet eligibility. So they have to be caught up in all of their current classes, and they have to come back and stay ahead. And at first, we didn't see that many kids going, but as the school year progressed, it was exciting for kids to say, oh, I want to go on this. This is a cool activity. And it's actually a learning activity. So you sneak that education part in there, not just, you're going to be gone from school. But yes, we are seeing that kids are working harder to be able to have this opportunity. This is the first year that we've really done some of that. So we'll see what the data looks like for some of those kids. But I know that we have some of our students that are on track for graduation really stay on track for graduation. And that's one of the incentives we're hoping is that they meet those graduation requirements.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Moving on, feel free to introduce yourself for the record. And I did mention we're trying to have that young lady testify at 10. When we get her testifying after she's concluded, then we'll go back to CWC. And again, my apologies for skipping over you, but we'll make it work. So please continue.
David Holbert, I'm the curriculum director at Fremont 38. This is the first time that I've done this, so if I make procedural errors, I apologize. Right now, I'm wishing that I had a slideshow so I didn't see myself on the great big TV right behind you all.
It's the worst.
Yeah, well, and then when they go behind, then I get to see the shiny spot right back here, so that doesn't help either. Like everybody said, we do try and focus on the whole child. We know that we have students that come to us from significant trauma, poverty, et cetera. And so we really try and look at the whole child. Our vision statement, I think, really reflects this. Our vision statement, I won't try and read you or tell you the whole thing because like every vision statement, it's flowery, but we have 3 pillars within it. Pillar 1 is that we're going to focus on making rigorous academic achievement for our students. Pillar 2 is that we are going to make sure that our students have a cultural identity and know who they are. Because if students don't know who they are, we can give them a ton of education and it doesn't translate into post-high school. And then the last is health, both social, emotional, and physical health. And so we try and focus on 2 to 3 main things each year, and we try and make sure we address each of our pillars. I believe I told you all in the fall when I introduced, when we kind of went through the different schools, one of our major focuses is on PLC this year. If we don't have that straightened out, if we don't have the 4 questions that Ms. Malloy talked about earlier, or the 3 big ideas of collaboration, learning is our focus. Teaching isn't our focus. Because I can teach a great lesson and nobody could learn a darn thing. I've had that happen in my own classroom where I thought, man, I taught a killer lesson. And then I looked, learning didn't happen. So whose fault is that? I have to come back and address the learning. Then the last one is that it's results oriented. We can try something, we can use a best practice. If that does not work with our students, we have to change. And so those are the 3 big ideas of a PLC, and we're focusing on that. This year, each school did a 30, 60, 90-day plan to step us through. We did one in the fall and one in the spring, because if you don't have a plan, it gets really easy. Principal Law can attest, she's had about 87 things fly in her face the last 2 weeks, that if you don't have a plan that you're following, that it's too easy to get distracted by the urgent that's right there in front of you. And so that's a practice that we have taken on and that will continue to go. I'm trying to go fast so that we don't interrupt anything. 2 of the big parts of the PLC process that we focused on are questions 1 and 2. What do we want students to learn? How do we know if they learned it? So that goes to our GVC. And one of the things that we have to be sure, that's a guaranteed viable curriculum. That means that all of our kindergartners, we guarantee you guys are going to get these things. It doesn't matter which teacher you have, you're going to get it. And I think the best example of why that's so important is if we talked about spelling words. We have 3 different third grade teachers. If they each chose their own spelling lists, taught them really well, those kids go on to 4th grade. The 4th grade teachers don't know which set of words those kids know. So we have to have it guaranteed that every 3rd grader is going to learn at a minimum these things. And so that's what we've really been focusing on getting nailed down for this year. That leads us to be able to do the MTSS work that's been discussed, because with MTSS, if you don't know exactly where to intervene, then it's like, well, this kid's bad at math, go teach him more math. And the interventionist doesn't have the information that they need. We can also start to intervene earlier. If we see a kid is struggling with a certain skill, we can start intervening in the classroom moments after that skill has been taught. And so that's where those are big pieces. SEL, we have teams. We're trying to work to be a very trauma skilled or trauma sensitive school. Both of those, some of those have ties to certain companies or certain certifications and those things. So we do send staff members to national conferences in order to learn. Principal Law can speak more to some of those. We're adopting a new SEL resource. I don't like to call it curriculum because curriculum is what is actually taught. And it doesn't work to just go word by word out of what you have. So, but it's a resource that's our primary resource that we'll use. We also use Sabres and My Sabres. Sabres, the teachers fill out. My Sabres, 2nd grade students on up fill out as our screener. It looks like the new program that we're looking at has their own screener, so we'll be comparing to see which one gives us more actionable data. With our language team, like I said, that one pillar of ours to make sure that our students have that identity of who they are. Our language team has been working with Red Cloud out of South Dakota on building a cohesive, consistent curriculum that will take a kid from kindergarten through 12th grade and produce bilingual. Our goal is in the next couple of years to be having students graduate with the seal of biliteracy. That's a big deal. It's not just something that is just us, but that will be something that I can't say I can't say that I did it. I can't, my name won't show up anywhere on it, but I'll be very proud of our district when that starts to happen. We are, one of the things that's really neat, and once again, this is not me, we'll be producing workbooks for the first time for our Hanana AD classes. So our Arapaho student language will have a workbook that they can work from. One of the difficulties of teaching one of the non-traditional world languages is, where do you get your materials from? And that's part of what we've been cooperating with Red Cloud on, is how do we set out a scope and sequence so that our kindergartners can learn this and work their way through. And so just having that workbook is going to be a tremendous achievement. I went to a conference and they talked about, in Alaska, they were trying to do just a 3rd grade social studies resource curriculum, and it took 3 years to do that. And so we've been partnering with Red Cloud for about a year now, and we're going to have workbooks. And now, is it everything? Is it the end all be all? Will it need improvements? Absolutely. But that's truly amazing to me that we have that going on. We do have a lot of the initiatives that have been spoken about for helping kids outside of the wraparound resources, McKinney-Vento. And we don't just stop with the McKinney-Vento funds, because we know that that's insufficient for the needs of our students and those kind of things. Like I said, I'm trying to move quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and stop talking and take questions that you have, because that will probably be far more meaningful.
Okay, thank you for that update. Any questions? You and I can visit later on, but the seal of biliteracy is something that we've worked on, and it's important, and I think it's wonderful, the work you're doing. Did you want to testify briefly, or do you want us to have the law student testify and then come back? I don't want to rush you, but if you had just a few remarks, or if you wanted more time, it's fine, just whatever you'd like.
Dos Ithadi Nakasage Nanana Katie Law. I'm the principal at Arapaho Charter. I was kind of an add-on to this based on my testimony here in the fall. So I do see we're out of time, and I could probably talk all day on all of these issues. So if there's a different way that you would like me to get my information specifically about the charter school to you, I'd be happy to do that. Echoing a lot of these things, guess the biggest thing right now is getting our graduation, getting ready to go. We will have our largest graduating class again, 2 years in a row. All things go well. These funerals and attendance that everybody has talked about is huge for us. I had 11 students out for the last 2 weeks in a school of 48 attending funerals in the middle of YTOP, in the middle of graduation, in the middle of ACT, in the middle of all of these things. A lot of times that looks like me personally going to the homes, which is where I'm going to head after I'm done here. But I would be happy to present any information to you in a different way or later on, whatever you prefer, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Lott. You spent some time with us last fall. We toured your school. We got to visit with some of your students, and I think we learned a lot. Committee members, I would just ask that maybe if we have specific questions for her, we can compile those and send them along, knowing that you want to probably get back in the classroom. And I don't want to make you put together a whole bunch of work for information that isn't requested. So committee, is that okay? Or do you have any questions? Please know we learned a lot touring your school. Thank you for making the time to be here with us today as well. Madam Co-Chair?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just quickly, and maybe did you have more that you wanted to specifically present to us? Because I do want to give you that opportunity.
Yeah, go ahead.
Madam Chair, Representative Oakley, yes, I did have some follow-ups based on our last conversation in the realm of the CTE, the profile of a graduate, kind of challenging what success looks like, and some data related to attendance.
I think, Madam Co-Chair, how about if you don't mind sticking around, we'll hear from the online presenter and then come back to you and try and start beginning to wrap up this topic once we hear. But I think we want to make sure you have that time, and thank you for having that information for us. So along those lines, do we have our online presenter? For those folks just walking in the room, we're a little off our agenda. We have a presenter who needs to go right at 10 and had reached out to us and made that request, and we're honoring that request. The topic will be on higher education, so we'll hear from her, and then we'll come back and finish our discussion on K through 12. We also did not hear yet from Kathy Wells, who is with Central Wyoming College, so we'll hear from her once we finish up with this panel right here. So we're a little out of order, but it'll be okay. Welcome. My name is Affie Ellis. I'm the chair of this committee. Our format is you'll do a presentation. All of your questions are questions from committee members that come through you will come through the chairwoman. And so you'll just respond, Senator Ellis responding to Representative Penn. So introduce yourself for the record. And then if you wouldn't mind just letting me know about how much time your presentation will take, that would be helpful. Yeah. Oh, and we've got Jason Robeson and another Mr. Trosper having a seat here. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll hear from them first and then you. I apologize. Okay, Mr. Trosper or Mr. Robeson, welcome. You turn on the mic when you'll see it's green and then introduce yourself for the record, please.
Okay. I'm James Trosper. I work for the President's Office. I'm the advisor to the President on Native American Affairs. I'm wearing a different hat today, and I'm not here representing that position. I'm going to introduce Jason. Both business councils have expressed interest for many years in the possibility of a tuition waiver for Native American students at UW to alleviate at least partly the financial burdens faced by these students, which in some cases can prevent them from pursuing higher education. This project came into being to provide to the tribal councils useful information about the possibility of a tuition waiver for UW Native students. The memorandum from ALI provides this information to the tribal councils. They have asked it to be shared with the committee at today's session. Jason has had the privilege of supervising ALI's research this academic year on a potential tuition waiver. Jason is the Carl M. Williams Professor of Law and Social Responsibility at the College of Law, as well as an adjunct professor at the Hobbs School. Jason joined the UW faculty in 2013, and since that time has served in several different roles involving the UW Native community, including currently serving on the Northern Arapaho Endowment Committee and previously serving on former President Lori Nichols' Native American Affairs Advisory Council. Jason has taught federal Indian law at the law school, as well as a variety of environmental and natural resources courses that address Native peoples, especially water law. A good deal of Jason's research focuses on Native peoples, including law review articles about the Bighorn adjudication and the U.S. Supreme Court's Arizona versus Navajo Nation decision last year. Jason is well known among many tribes in the West and in the Southwest, and many tribes and people consider him a good friend and an ally. And we're very fortunate to have him at the University of Wyoming.
Thank you, Mr. Robeson.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm Jason Robison. I'm a faculty member at the College of Law, University of Wyoming. It's the first chance I've had to address the committee in my career. So representatives, senators, I appreciate it. I'm grateful to be a UW faculty member and for the opportunity to consult with my colleague, James, Special Advisor on Native American Affairs to President Seidel, and to work with Allie, from whom we'll hear shortly on this research. As James did, I should follow suit and offer a disclaimer. All of my remarks are provided in an individual capacity, not as a formal representative of my university, purely as a supervising faculty member. Every year, I have the good fortune of working with a research assistant at the College of Law on whatever projects are timely during that particular academic year. It's a real privilege. I've had a chance to do a lot of different research projects or supervise a lot of research projects over the past decade. And I'm extremely fortunate to have been able to work with Allie White Eagle this year, focusing on this project, focusing on a UW Native student tuition waiver from roughly September to January, and also investing a few weeks during this spring term into developing a new version of the law school's advanced water law and policy seminar that is going to focus on Native peoples and their water rights, including the Bighorn adjudication. We're excited about rolling that out. I won't digress into that further. Suffice it to say, Allie has been an exceptional student at the law school over the past 3 years. I want to put that in the record for sure, memorialize it. In addition to our work together at the law school, Allie spent the last summer working for the Native American Rights Fund in Boulder, Colorado, or based out of Boulder, Colorado. They work all over the United States and earned the Siletz Award for that work. Very proud of that. This spring further, Allie worked for the Department of the Interior as an extern, and she also worked as my colleague, Professor Temple Stollinger's research assistant during the entire academic year, contributing to bison restoration, a bison restoration project on Wind River. Some of you, I imagine, are familiar with that work. Allie's research and remarks will speak for themselves, but suffice it to say, I think and hope they'll prove eye-opening to the committee, provide valuable food for thought about what a UW Native student tuition waiver might look like, different forms of that. And as with James, I'd be happy to field any questions following Allie's remarks. Thank you.
Any questions? I think we would like to hear from Ms. White Eagle. We're sensitive to the fact that you have to take a test. So when you're finished testifying, maybe you can regroup and get ready for that exam. We want to wish you well on that. But feel free to unmute your microphone, and we look forward to hearing you summarize your research.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Just a quick introduction of myself. My name is Allison White Eagle. I'm Northern Arapaho, and I'm finishing up my final year here at the College of Law at UW. I was actually approached by James and Professor Robeson about the potential research on what a native student tuition waiver would look like at the University of Wyoming. And so I kind of just delved right into that research. And if it's okay with you guys, I can just start my presentation now. Okay.
Please.
Okay. So when I initially did the research, I looked back at the history of any potential asks. And it looked like there was one in 2018 where both tribes had representatives approach the Board of Trustees with an ask of a Native student tuition waiver. And at that meeting, they shared their concerns about what it's like for a tribal student to come to the University of Wyoming and pursue a higher education, and all of the barriers that are faced by tribal students. And so, one of the biggest concerns was the financial aspect of that, coming to college and what that entails. And at the end of that meeting, the Board of Trustees ultimately tasked a few individuals with finding further information. They wanted information on things like retention rates of Native students, graduation rates of Native students. What was the cost of a tuition waiver going to look like for the university? And so that was in 2018, and that's just where it sat for a while. And so that's where I started. I just wanted to kind of look at what that ask entailed, so that I could try to find some of that information on my own and present it in a thorough manner. And so one of the things that I started looking at was the land ownership and revenue generation at the University of Wyoming, and how the University of Wyoming came to kind of occupy this area. And so the first thing I did was, because, there have been changes in ownership of this area, and those changes have been a result of things like, treaty language and land cessions and different legislation. And so the first treaty that I looked at was the Horse Creek Treaty of 1851, which was signed by 9 tribes and the U.S. government. And among those 9 tribes were the Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho, Crow, Mandan, Hidatsa, Arikara, and Assiniboine. And that treaty actually encompassed the geographical area of Wyoming. And in the memorandum that was, I believe, handed to you earlier, there's a map of what that Horse Creek Treaty covered. And as you can see, it covers a pretty significant amount of Wyoming. And then what I did was I moved on from the Horse Creek Treaty to the Fort Bridger Treaties of 1863 and 1868. And within those treaties, the boundaries of the Wind River Reservation were actually, drawn out. And it involved the Eastern Shoshone tribe. And as you all know, the Wind River Reservation sits within Wyoming. And then finally, I moved on to the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868. And that was signed by the Lakota, Blackfeet, different bands of the Lakota and the Arapaho. And it set out the boundaries of the territories and included lands west of the Missouri River. So all of these treaties kind of establish the Arapaho and the Eastern Shoshone and their land base. And what I did then was I moved on, because we're trying to look at the change in ownership of this area. I moved on to the Morrill Act of 1862, which involves the University of Wyoming, because the University of Wyoming is a land grant university. And what that basically means is the Morrill Act of 1862 established land grant universities. It was an act that provided each state with 30,000 acres of federal and indigenous lands as a way to establish higher education in these areas. And so the University of Wyoming was established as the state's Morrill Act land grant university in 1886, and it serves as Wyoming's only university. And UW opened in 1887. Wyoming was granted just under 90,000 acres from the Morrill Act to establish the University of Wyoming. And when I was looking at that, I wanted to look at what that meant. How did the land ownership change from the treaty language into the Morrill Act? Where did it change hands from tribes to the university? And how did the tribes benefit in that way? And actually, through land cessions and through the treaties, all of this land was actually lost to tribes. And through that 90,000 acres, the United States paid the tribes a total of $1,954. But the principal endowment raised from the sale of this acreage is $627,809. And so that means that UW has made a return on revenue generated from the sale of these lands from the Morrill Act at a rate of 321 times. And so despite this considerable revenue generation, UW's Native student population, Native faculty, staff population is pretty low. And then I moved on to looking at the student data that the Board of Trustees was requesting. I looked at enrollment rates, retention rates, graduation and transfer rates. And there's an extensive amount of information in the memorandum that was handed to you, so I'll just highlight the most recent data that I have. So the retention rates for Native students for the fall of 2022, there were 22 self-identifying Native students in attendance, and 7 of those students were retained to the fall of 2023 for a retention rate of 32%. The graduation rates for Native students for the fall of 2023, there were 22 self-identifying Native students in attendance, and 1 of those students graduated before the fall of 2023 for a 4% graduation rate. And then transfer rates. Native students tend to transfer at a considerably high rate from community colleges across the state. And so for the fall of, from the fall of 2017 to the fall of 2022, transfer rates from Native students from CWC was 21%, Casper College 13%, Northern Wyoming Community College 12%, ALCCC 12%, Western Wyoming Community College 7%, Eastern Wyoming Community College 6%, and Northwest Community College 4%. And so you're seeing a high amount of Native students starting out at these community colleges and then transferring for a bachelor's degree to the University of Wyoming. And so what I finally did was I moved on to the need of Native students, and I looked at the financial aid data that is available to Native students. And so what I found was that UW has 15 scholarships designated for Native students. And during the 2022-2023 academic year, $160,674 in specific scholarships for Native students attending UW was distributed to 36 recipients. And all of this data came from the University of Wyoming's financial aid office. So that's where I got my information. And so what I had found was that Hathaway scholarships are the largest source of scholarship-based support for in-state students at UW. So not just native students, but in-state students. And as a result of that, only 13% of Native students receive the Hathaway. And so the main scholarships for Native students at the University of Wyoming are the Chief Washakie Endowment, the Northern Arapaho Endowment, the Northern Arapaho Sky People Endowment, those 3 in particular. And what we found was that the amount of applicants far exceeded the availability of scholarship monies. And so there were more applicants to the scholarship than what was available. So a lot of students missed out. And I went further into the research. I asked the financial aid office for further data on this, and they found that the need, so the students that were awarded these scholarships, right, it says that 39% for the 2021-2022 academic year, 39% of the students' need was met. For the 2022-2023 academic year, 39% of that need was met. And for the 2023-2024 academic year, 43% of student need was met. So what I found was that not only was there a lack of funds to fund all Native students, but not even half of that need was being met by what was being funded to the students who were being funded. And then I moved on to peer institutions. So the University of Wyoming in 2016 created a list of peer institutions, and they divided that into two different categories: close peer institutions and stretch peer institutions. And so I kind of gathered some data from those close peer institutions and looked at what they were offering their Native students at their universities. And what I found was that there were different forms of tuition waivers or financial support for Native students at these institutions. One form of this support was a full tuition waiver. And I found that the University of Nevada, Reno, University of Maine, Montana State University, University of Montana, North Dakota State University, and New Mexico State University all offered full tuition waivers for Native students. And I think it's important to kind of understand how they did that. So there's a method in which these universities were able to implement these things and different requirements. And so, for example, the University of Nevada, Reno offers a full tuition waiver for Native students who are members of a federally recognized tribe who are located within the boundaries of Nevada. And they have to provide all of that information to the financial aid office. And then on top of that, they also need to meet the requirements that that specific financial aid office requires. So they have to be in good standing. They have to, all of those different requirements that that specific university has in place, they also have to meet. And then I looked at what other institutions were doing, and I found that other institutions were doing a reduced tuition. So these universities, the University of Idaho, University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and Colorado State University offered a reduced tuition rate for Native students. And instead of a full tuition waiver, what they have done is implemented out an in-state tuition rate for out-of-state tribal students. And again, each of these universities have their own requirements, have their own eligibility steps that each student must abide by. And then I also found that the Utah State University doesn't offer a full tuition waiver or a reduced tuition waiver. Instead, they do something like gap filling, where a Native student who comes in has different, like the Pell Grant, for example, or any other scholarship, and it's not meeting their need. Say their need is $45,000, their scholarships are covering $40,000 of that need. There's a gap of $5,000. They have a scholarship in place that covers the rest of that $5,000 to make sure that that student's need is met. And then finally, there were institutions that I found that had no form of tuition waiver in place, and those included Oklahoma State University, South Dakota State University, Kansas State, West Virginia, and Clemson. And so that was all, that was the research that I had done, and I had found that, UW is in a situation where they have the opportunity to strengthen the relationships between the tribes here in Wyoming and on Wind River, and start being in a position to better equip students who are coming from the reservation to be financially successful while they're here. Because as a Native student myself, I can say it's difficult to be here on our own, because oftentimes we're first generation students. Our parents, our grandparents haven't gone to the university. They haven't had a higher education. And so not only do they not know how to navigate the financial aid system, but they oftentimes cannot financially support us while we're at school. And I am just a specific example. I'm a mother. I'm a single mother, and so I'm on my own down here. And oftentimes what's actually happening is sometimes like my grandma will call me and she'll say, I need gas money. So I'm trying to navigate this system that isn't able to help me in the ways that I need, that are specific to tribal students. And, I mean, it's hard to be down here. It's hard to be one of the only ones in these classrooms sometimes, and to kind of feel like nobody knows the struggles of, pursuing a higher education as a Native student. And so that's actually why I went ahead and did the research that I did, to hopefully help promote the tribe's interest in a tuition waiver for Native students. Ho, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Allie. Can you tell us when you need to go? I just want to make sure we're not putting you in a time pressure.
Sure, I can stay till about 10:45.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for the research you put together, knowing you're, a full-time law student, and to compile this research on your own is really impactful. James, I would ask in the future, I'd look at the date on this memo. It was dated January 18th. If you guys could get this to us a little bit sooner, it's just a big memo, and I wish I would have had a few more days to digest it and read it over. But with that, committee, do you have any questions for Allie? Representative Chestick.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Ms. White Eagle. Good to see you again. I have a question for you. The table on page 8 shows the 3 major sources, major endowments for scholarships. First of all, the scholarship amounts are how much? They're not full tuition, doesn't look like. How much on average do you think these scholarships amount to?
Ms. White Eagle?
Those figures are I actually don't know those. Those questions would be like for Chief Washke Foundation, that would be like a question for James. But I will say, and I forgot to point this out as I was presenting because I'm super nervous, is that these 3 scholarships in particular are all funded by the tribes. So the Hathaway Scholarship is coming from state funds. These scholarships in particular are coming from the tribes. And so these scholarships are limited in that. And how they're allocated is, I'm not sure how like Chief Washke is determined, or the Northern Arapaho Endowment. I think the Northern Arapaho Endowment is trying to cover the cost of attendance. The Sky People Scholarship, I believe, is a set amount regardless of what year you're in, what major you're getting, or where you're at. I believe that's what it is, but I am not familiar with them. And like I said, that's probably a question better for James and Professor Robeson.
I think James had excuse me, did you have a response, Professor?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Chestick, I serve on the Northern Arapaho Endowment Committee. I've done that for about the past 5 years, and we deliberate every spring as far as reviewing applications and deciding who will be awarded. So in that capacity, I can tell you a little bit about our process. 2 things I think were probably most notable for the committee. One, the MO, as it were, the marching orders offered by the tribe are to confer these awards in amounts that will cover full tuition and fees, as well as help with some living expenses, right? The total amounts are identified in the far right column there on page 8 in the Northern Arapaho Endowment section. Those are always individualized, meaning the specific cost of a student's tuition, fees, et cetera, books. I forgot that. Those are always going to be specific to the applicant. So that's the general approach. The challenge is the ratio of applicants to awardees. And if you look at that, particularly from my lived experience over the past 5 years, in the middle columns there, you're talking about award rates that just clearly identify there's unmet need for the Native students who've applied for the awards. So first point is that's the general guidance as far as what gets covered. Second point is that's the ratio of applications to grantees. Happy to answer further questions about any of that stuff.
Okay, follow up.
Thank you, Professor Robeson and Ms. White Eagle. You anticipated my second question, which was on page 7. You note that these scholarship funds come from the tribes themselves. So the two sources of funding right now for Native students are Hathaway, which is state of Wyoming, these scholarship funds, which are funded by the tribes. Does the university itself have any other source of scholarship funding directed towards Native students?
Ms. White Eagle,
Thank you.
did you hear the question?
I did. Thank you. I believe so. I believe that there are, and those are coming from private donors through the foundation. I don't know. I don't unfortunately have a list of all of those scholarships, but again, those are coming from private donors through the foundation, and their requirements are specific to them, and their amounts are specific to them as well.
Thank you.
Okay, and I want to just be clear, we're trying to get a little caught up. We're about half an hour behind on our agenda. So if we have questions for Ms. White Eagle, if not, then we can wrap up her testimony and then we'll go back and finish the K through 12 discussion.
Madam Chairwoman,
Senator Case.
I just wanted to thank Ms. White Eagle and tell her that when she finished her presentation, there was applause in the room that I don't think you could have heard. And so there were people that, I can see from the faces and the applause that people are very grateful for your testimony, and good luck today.
Yep. Oh, can you hear that? There's applause. There's clapping. And you did a great job presenting. You did a great job presenting. I know it's a little, you can be nervous doing that, but you did a great job. Any other questions for our presenter? James, did you want to add something?
I just wanted to clarify one thing, and that is to your question. The Chief Washke Foundation established 2 endowments at the University of Wyoming, and we have 3 of our board members that are here. Cal is our treasurer. Mark Harris is here. He's the co-chair, and I'm the chair of that foundation. And the 2 endowments that we established there don't fully cover the need. I just wanted to make that clear. The Northern Arapaho tribe is the donor for the Northern Arapaho Endowment. The Sky People Higher Education is the donor for the Sky People. In 1989, the General Council of the Arapaho tribe approved to establish the Northern Arapaho Endowment, and I think it's grown over 3 million. I don't know. Do you have the exact number? It's over 3 million. And the way that works is it's a full ride and for the students that are selected. And it's really tough. And I think that the tribe at the time, the year that we presented to the Board of Trustees, they had a number of qualified applicants and didn't have enough money to fund all of the applicants. And so that's when they went to the Board of Trustees. And Lee Spoonhunter's here. He works with the Sky People and the Northern Arapaho tribe. So he's a donor to both of those, and I don't know if he wants to say anything.
Thank you. Thank you,
Vice Chairman.
James. And thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
And introduce yourself, please.
Lisa Winter, Co-Chairman, Northern Apple Tribe, also previous Director of Sky People Higher Education, and also now the President of the Sky People Higher Education Board. When we had back in 2017, when we first made it our trip as tribal leaders to the University of Wyoming, we were made aware that the endowment, the Northern Apple Endowment is approximately about $2.4 million. It is one of two of the biggest endowments at the University of Wyoming. And I believe that there were 6 recipients this school year. And there was actually 18 applicants this school year for the Northern Apple Endowment, and six were awarded scholarships. So in 2017, as you heard me say yesterday, education is one of my priorities as a tribal leader. I've made routine trips down to meet with, at the time, President Nichols, interim President Theobald, and President Sedell. We need to figure out a way to educate our children. One of our elders in our general council, which is our membership of 18 and over, who the tribal council answers to, one of the elders said, education is the bridge out of poverty. And so today, you've heard a lot about education, and I've tried to work with the University of Wyoming. How do we fix this? How do we get all of our students who are obtaining an education at the University of Wyoming to be fully funded so that they can come back and help their communities as educated tribal members? And so we've asked the UW Foundation, we've asked the UW president numerous times, how can we fundraise through the UW Foundation? We get the portfolio every year that's mailed to us. There are many endowments at the University of Wyoming that they are finding donors for, they are having fundraisers for, but it seems that the UW Northern Arapaho Endowment is left behind a lot of the time. And I know that they will tell you that the Chief Washke Scholarship the endowment is growing, and it's because the committee for the endowment are finding friends of their endowment to donate to that. So it's nothing that the University of Wyoming is doing. It's the scholarship committee, the friends of the Chief Washke Endowment that are helping them. But how did we end up here? It was last summer in June when some of our tribal members, Councilwoman at the time, co-chairwoman Karen Returns to War, Councilman Waylon Large, Sky People Higher Education members, Gary Goggles, Ron McElroy, who was the director then, and also board member of Sky People, Craig Ferris. Well, then the UW Board of Trustees asked for, well, what's the numbers? Where's the data? How can we see this? So it was done today. The data was presented. And also, I asked if we were going to be on the agenda with the Board of Trustees. And I talked to 2 of the Board of Trustees, and I don't want to name them because they're not here today. But I asked them, well, can we be on the January agenda to present Allie's presentation and for the tribe? And we were told at the time by the Board of Trustees, no, you need to go to Tribal Select. This is a decision for them and for the state legislative body. They're the ones who are going to decide if there's a tuition waiver. So that's how we got to where we are. For me, and as a council, this council has been very receptive to higher education. And I'm always making the rounds at the university to make sure that we provide the best opportunities for our future generations to come. So when I'm long gone and we're all long gone here, that the University of Wyoming can be the greatest avenue for Northern Arapahoe and Eastern Shoshone students to get a quality higher education. Even sometimes that doesn't stop at bachelor's anymore. As you see, one of our tribal members is going to graduate with her Juris Doctorate. And that's where we need to go. And that's where we're looking for your help today, is that help us with our tribal membership. Let's get them educated, and some of them may be sitting where you are, will be where I'm at here in the future. But we can't do that until we are committed to provide a quality higher education and the best opportunities for tribal members that at one time lived on the land where the University of Wyoming sits.
Thank you, Lee. I want to be mindful, it is 10:41, so I think if it's okay with committee members, I don't want to keep continuing to talk about the higher ed just yet. We need to go back and finish our K through 12 discussion. So we're kind of getting we're going to lose our momentum as we're talking about all the issues that were raised. I want to thank you again, Allie, for your presentation, your good research. We will reach out to you if we have more questions, and go get them, go ace that exam. Good luck.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay, committee members. You bet. So to finish the K through 12 discussion, let's have Ms. Law come back, as well as Kathy Wells from CWC. If we could finish the K through 12 discussion by 11, we'll be about an hour behind on our agenda, and then we'll pick up again with higher education with maybe a quick break in there. So thank you.
Dose again, Madam Chair. So quickly trying my very best to get you guys back on schedule and back to my duties, as well as a few other things have come up here in the meantime. To focus on kind of following up with where we left off in November, looking at our CTE program.
If you guys could please be quiet in the background. We're having difficulty hearing up here. Thank you.
We are devoting a significant amount of investment into our career technical components, which is not just a financial investment, which is very difficult in a very tiny rural school, but the time and the personnel as well. We are building in a lot of classroom-based career technical. But like one of the presenters earlier said, it's really hard to take auto shop like in a classroom without hands-on experiences. So we do partner with CWC right now for that, doing some dual enrollment. Lots of things come up with those kinds of things. Like today, for example, we don't have transportation available to take our students to their CWC class. So kind of running into some of those hindrances have been very difficult in our school, getting those programs up to speed. We are looking at working with Job Corps as well. I met with them here about 2 weeks ago to try and get some of those CTE components brought to us without having the ability to like hire a full-time teacher when we have a school of 48. Looking more for us at the Iris Charter School, we are focused a lot more on that profile of a graduate that the department has put out, rather than the specifically only like data points on a test score. Kind of just redefining what success to students can look like. Each student is a story. Those data points and test scores are a part of that. But it doesn't tell the whole picture, especially things like we're dealing with here this week with the amount of funerals that my students are missing while those tests are happening, trying to get them back to graduation and combating those attendance compliance issues. And with those, we do have a pretty flexible attendance policy at the school to address those. Why are the kids not in school? Is it them? Is it the families? I've turned in multiple truancy and habitual truancy reports to like Northern Arapahoe DFS, the tribal courts, to try and get some backing for that. There's definitely some holes in the systems and communications that become a hindrance to getting kids in school. But looking at why those kids are gone, justifying it in comparison to did they meet the requirements for graduation. And then that's kind of what we're dealing with right now as we gear up for graduation, and those attendance pieces are very big. A lot of times we don't have the resources available to others that other schools have. We have a district-wide initiative But the charter school specifically, I have 4 full-time staff members, 1 long-term sub, and 6 support staff. So trying to build attendance teams, trying to build some of those things can be overwhelming for the staff. But we get it done. We absolutely do. And with a lot of that hard work and dedication, we are seeing those successes pay off. My attendance data has gone from like 65% attendance to 83% attendance, just regarding the last few weeks here because it's taken a backslide. But it's through the initiatives that the school has. What's also helped us is the ability to have our own sports teams again. We haven't had our own sports teams for 10 to 15 years, depending on the sport. This year we were kind of forced into that, ended up being a pretty good thing, and all goes well and we can get particular students back into school and caught back up in their classes. We'll have our first state athlete here in a couple of weeks, which I'm also a coach for, so yay. Super excited about that. But it is a lot of resources being spent to try and do what needs to be done in a lot of those home visits and getting all of the jurisdictions and pieces into place. It's a lot harder with our population to motivate students when they're a little bit older. The little candies and little stress balls just don't quite cut it for 18-year-olds. So we do look at creative ways to get students in there. We have the attendance challenges and incentives. We have pizza parties, all student led. So we bring them into that process, and that's a huge reason as to why we're seeing the success that we are. At the charter school in particular, we do spend most of our time and energy on that social emotional component. We are getting that new screener as my partner here, David, talked about, brand new program. We haven't had a social emotional program at the high school. I don't think ever. So we're building that in right now, and putting the things that we know work from past practices into place, and using that data with another screener aside from FastBridge to help us guide that. Again, with my typical population of being the older students, sometimes those assessment screeners don't tell the whole picture either. Our students are very guarded in a lot of ways. They are survivors. They keep their personal lives hidden in those little check boxes. But what we really know what goes on with students is when they come into my office and they sit down and they have that conversation with me about the funerals they're going to, about the things that they have going on at home, about how they feel coming out of that ACT assessment and what that environment is like. So there are very specific things that I've come to find out after talking with my students about assessment pieces in general, and why maybe they're not feeling successful in taking the YTOP. Let's see, I'm really trying to get us back on track here. Elders in the classroom has been really important to us. We've had elders in our classroom. Our elder that has been with us, boy, for as long as I can remember, passed away here a couple of months ago. We haven't been able to bring ourselves to refill that with anybody else yet. Graduation is rocking and rolling. Like I said, it's our biggest class. We will be expecting 14. Got a little bit of work to do here in the last couple of weeks as we combat that attendance piece and those college classes. We understand a lot of times why our students are gone, but college professors don't always get that same memo when a student is missing 2 to 3 weeks of college class for funerals. It's hard to communicate that with them and get what the students need, their makeup time and things like that. We are also experiencing some discussions with our senior class right now. We should have had 15 graduates this year. We are going to have an empty chair based on some unfortunate events that happened just about a year ago. So our class is kind of getting together and figuring out how we want to deal with that empty chair on top of all the other funerals and just end of the year, everything, and scholarships going and FAFSA and we're bringing in all these outside people to kind of help get our students college bound. It's a lot going on and a lot of pressure for students who are not used to having that voice. It's a work in progress, but we are seeing like huge gains, especially in that sports realm. That was all student-led. They didn't have the opportunity to participate in sports like they had, and that upset them, especially our seniors. And so they took it upon themselves to say, no, we want this, we need it, we deserve it, and we're doing it. And we did it. And then we're building that program from there. And that does help combat some of those at-risk indicators of giving a student a motivation to get into school, to seeing that pride, to seeing that community support come out, watch those games for the first time, and having that just incredible senior night that we haven't been able to have for 10 to 15 years. Our attendance data is showing, our YTOP data is showing success as well. We're seeing that in incremental growth as opposed to a label of proficient, advanced, basic, below basic, things like that. But you really have to take the time to kind of challenge that definition, look more of the profile of a graduate. We've gotten students, all of our seniors, that have put forth the effort and initiative. We've gotten them driver's licenses this year. We've gotten our 18+ students registered to vote. We get them tribal IDs. We get them their birth certificates and any other documents they need as part of our newly developed senior capstone based on the profile of the graduate. We developed that course based on those indicators to better prepare our students for the next level, whatever that is, and working with them from the time that they enroll at Arapahoe Charter on their career path, whatever that is, and their individual learning plans, and kind of build that in and adjust to the changes as needed. We have students, I think 4 of them have gotten accepted into colleges directly right after high school, which has never happened in the past at Arapahoe Charter. We've had 1 go directly from college after high school. A lot of them take that gap year, but this year we've got them already enrolled. We've got them scholarships, a few more looking in that direction, doing the college visits, those types of things. The SEL piece is huge for us right now, and we are in the next year shifting that focus now that we've kind of established that kids know we love them. They're there. We have that basic needs met. Now we're going to shift and maintain that momentum, and then put more of our efforts towards that MTSS from the academic piece, and looking at intervention blocks and things like that, and taking some of our data from this year's schedule and looking at that over the summer, what worked, what didn't work. If this worked, how can we enhance it to start seeing some of that success academically? The thing that we also have this year that helps our data in particular is that we are seeing more students return to Arapahoe Charter year after year, as opposed to kind of starting at another school, coming to charter, going to another school again, and we can't track that data from year to year. Our student population is so different. We are starting to see that trend because of some of the things that we have implemented here, and why kids are saying they want to come back. So we are definitely starting to see that growth. But again, 48 students, it's really hard to get a sample size that's actually presentable. So those are kind of my updates. Trying to get everybody back on track. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other things that I had forgotten, but I think I hit the high points of what you wanted to see updated since November.
Thank you for sticking around, and thank you for your patience with the schedule. Questions? Seeing none, thank you again. Oh, Senator Barlow?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Law, as always. My question is going to the CTE and the relationship you have with Central Wyoming, the dual enrollment. That comes out of you pay tuition through the block grant and of course CWC. Just remind me, I don't recall, not on education, I don't recall how dual enrollment works for the cost of tuition at CWC. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Ms. Law?
Madam Chair, Senator Barlow, we use partnerships with CWC and with BOCES to help support the cost of those. When students are unsuccessful in their college classes, it kind of does put a little bit of a wrench in things from the funding and putting forth the investment into our students and making sure that that's successful in that long-term investment. But we do use BOCES, yes.
Follow up?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So if I recall correctly, BOCES is a school district by school district assessment of $500,000. So is that accurate? Is that coming through your school district, that BOCES dollars, or is it done differently here? Because I'm from a unified school district, one county, one school district, so I don't know how it would work. Sorry, Madam Chairman. Anyway, Madam Chairman, whoever can answer that now or later is fine. I just got to be reminded of how it would work and the wrench, what the wrench is, my concern is with the wrenches that they get thrown. One from enrollment or truancy or, ADM loss, and then second from this potential tuition issue. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Ms. Law or Ms. Wills, who would like to tackle?
Yes, thank you, Chair Ellis. I can address the basic funding structure of the dual and concurrent enrollment. So concurrent enrollment is when a student registers for a college class that is taught in the high school by a high school instructor. That is a wash system. Doesn't cost the students anything, doesn't cost the school districts anything except for the cost of books. Dual enrollment is when the student is registering for a college class that may not be taught, though that isn't taught in their school district. Maybe they're taking it on campus at CWC through a hybrid format or online. All of the funding for those educational opportunities comes from the Fremont County BOCES, in which every school district in Fremont County takes part. But the important piece is this college education comes at no cost to the student or the family, and the only cost to the school district is for any textbooks that are required.
Okay, any further questions? Seeing none, Ms. Law, if you need to leave, the fine to go. If you want to stay, you're welcome to as well. But with that, thank you, Kathy, for being with us. And again, my apologies for pushing you down on the agenda. We look forward to hearing your testimony. And it is almost 11, so we'll go a little bit. Madam Co-Chair?
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Just a quick privilege to ask and remind everybody that phones need to be on silent, please.
Okay, Ms. Wells, please proceed.
Okay, Madam Chair, thank you, Dickie Shaner, Department of Education. One quick note on the last topic. The Joint Education Interim Committee has a priority on CTE, and we're going to be looking at dual and concurrent and all the issues that exist with that, and hoping to come in with some legislative fixes next session to make that process work better. So on the agenda for higher education, the third bullet was academic pathways to meet Wind River Reservation educational and workforce needs. And that's what Dr. Wells and I are here to present about. So if it's okay to move that bullet up into this K-12 section and we can go.
That's fine, thanks.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. So Dr. Wells and I are here to talk about an initiative that we started last year where Superintendent Dagenfelder had been having conversations with members of this committee, other members of the legislature, superintendents, business people, all from Fremont County about what are we doing to ensure the progress of our Native students in school districts in Fremont County and the three on the reservation. And there's probably nothing less productive than the state just deciding unilaterally, we're going to do X education initiative and then go tell Fremont County, this is what we're going to do. So we brought all the superintendents together. We met at Fremont 25 in Riverton, had St. Stephen's there too, sat down for a couple hours and just said, how can we help? What can we do as the State Department of Ed to advance the work you're doing or help you build another initiative? And we talked about the Hathaway Scholarship, graduation, chronic absenteeism, all the issues we've been talking about today. And at the end of that meeting, the consensus was help us do something coordinated, more deliberate about career and technical education, workforce training, et cetera. And of course, immediately CWC was the partner that we needed at the table in that. And so we reached out to President Tyndall and Dr. Wells, and they couldn't have been more excited and proactive to jump in with us. And so the department has executed an MOU with CWC. We've dedicated to this effort, and it is really designed to look at all of the CTE offerings that exist currently in the Fremont schools, what exists at CWC, and then what's sort of the wish list by each district and CWC. What's in demand, but that you don't have the resources or ability to provide right now. And then also a piece of that too is this work keys test, which was mentioned earlier in the day. The reason we think that's important to bring that back to the surface is you can substitute a work key score for the ACT score to qualify for the lowest level of the Hathaway Scholarship. And we are going to engage in integrating some curriculum and practice tests, test prep for that work keys to ensure, excuse me, the students that engage in this more CTE heavy pathway, that we're also making sure they hit all the curriculum requirements, the GPA requirements, and they get that work key score. So at a minimum, we're going to make sure they all get that Hathaway so they can continue on to CWC or wherever they need to go. So in a nutshell, we think that this initiative is, everyone's pretty excited about it. We think it's going to move the needle in a lot of different ways. It's going to help with a lot of the issues we've talked about today. And if I could, Madam Chair, just turn it over to Dr. Wells, who's really can talk about how it's being operationalized.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm not sure that I introduced myself formally. For the record, Kathy Wells, Vice President for Academic Affairs at CWC. I appreciate the focus that this select committee has, very important to our communities, and certainly a focus of CWC as well. One of the things that I would like to stress about how this project is designed is we're not starting from the ground up. We're not totally throwing everything out that we had and starting over. We initially started conversations with superintendents, building principals, counselors, curriculum directors at all the Fremont County high schools to get a spot check of where we are. What are we currently offering with you that is working, that your students are interested in, that you want to continue? And where are those opportunities where we're not offering concurrent enrollment or dual enrollment opportunities for your students that they really want to? I heard from a lot of superintendents that space was an issue in their wish list. They didn't have a physical space where education could occur, or they didn't have resources with an instructor. CTE instructor shortages are significant and profound across the nation, certainly in Wyoming. And they just didn't have the resources, either physical or personnel, to put into what they really did want to offer. So we looked at where we could create some opportunities with stronger partnerships. And I do have to say those conversations are probably the part of this project so far, knowing that we're in the very early stages, that have been the most rewarding, to hear how both sides want exactly the same thing for the students. We all want to tackle student engagement. And one of the best ways with best practices in education, not just in college or higher ed, but in those later years of public education, is getting the students engaged and interested in something that matters to them. And so that's where these career pathways come into play. One of the projects that I'm getting ready to contract with a vendor for is to create pathways specific to every career cluster that will then be customized for each school district. So students know from the very beginning, okay, I'm interested in maybe welding and construction trades. They do some career exploration to get an idea of what that means for them as a career. And they know from the moment they walk through those doors as a 9th grader, what coursework they need to take to meet high school graduation requirements, to meet Hathaway requirements, and then map to CWC's corresponding certificates and degrees to finish whatever program of studies required so they can enter the workforce. So that very clear and precise communication is going to be a huge benefit right out of the gate. So definitely a resource that high schools can use when they're registering students, and that students and their families know, okay, this is what I need to do. Here's my plan. With that plan, part of this project that I'm really passionate about is how can we meet a high school graduation requirement that is nearly identical to a college course requirement in that pathway to get that certificate or degree? And how can we streamline how we deliver that education from our curricular design standpoint? One, to engage the student, to make it more project-based, hands-on, which we know is what engages the student. They get very excited about that. But how we can streamline that pathway to shorten the time to completion. If you're a high school student and you look at that pathway and, oh my gosh, 4 years here and another year at CWC, that's too long. I just can't do that. How do we streamline it to shorten the time to completion? So our goal is that when students follow this pathway and meet the requirements as they go along, ticking those check boxes as they register and complete courses, that they have something in hand that they could enter the workforce with at the time of high school graduation as a certificate or industry certifications that are embedded into those courses that they get along the way. Or if it's an associate degree that's required for entry into their selected career, that we minimize the time that they're required to continue to complete their coursework following high school graduation. So that is the focus of this initiative. It's not going to be fast and it's not going to be easy, but I have seen such excitement on both sides of the conversation from my CWC, CTE faculty. They are chomping at the bit to work with high school instructors to team teach courses, maybe to share curriculum, a hybrid curriculum. Again, looking at ways that we can change our curricular design and delivery to shorten that time to completion. Chief of Staff Shaner already mentioned the embedding of the work keys criteria. That is going to make every one of these students Hathaway eligible. To put a little plug in for our program, every high school student that's Hathaway eligible also gets a guaranteed scholarship from CWC. So we're trying to remove as many barriers as possible to incentivize students to complete. The other thing that we're looking at incentivizing students, for example, if you are on a career pathway for auto technology, there is about $1,200 to $1,500 worth of tools that you need to have that belong to you to take your first job in the auto industry. We are looking at ways we can provide the student access to those tools through this whole course of study, even when they're in high school. And then when they graduate, we gift those tools to them. So they don't then have to shell out that money before they take their first job. So that's just an example of ways we're looking to incentivize students to complete. The other part about this project is building the capacity for this to happen. So one of our biggest challenges so far has been the logistics behind making this all fit together. It's like a puzzle that we're trying to figure out how to put the pieces together. But the puzzle looks different at every single school district. They don't all have the same wish list. We don't all have the same current offerings, but there are some consistent trades that each school district is looking for. There is a core of about 4 or 5 trades. So currently, with some of the funding that has been provided to us for this project from the Department of Ed, is looking at where we need equipment or space resources. For example, welding is one of those 4 or 5 core tracks. At CWC, we have a really nice welding lab, recently, within the past 5 years anyway, updated. We have space to build out additional student lab welding booths to expand capacity. We know we're going to be getting more students. We're almost at capacity right now. I think there's 1 welding booth that's not being used this current semester. We had to have students rotate last fall. So we will be using some of the funds to expand capacity in that area so that we can serve those students when they get to us for those final, more advanced skills needed to complete their degree. On the high school side, my faculty and the high school CTE instructors are soon to begin working on finalizing. We've identified some of their equipment needs, but we need to put a final list together so that we can start making purchases on what do they need in the high schools where maybe they offer a few introductory courses in construction trades. But in order for us to shorten this time to completion and bridge the high school and the college requirements of learning in their setting, again, to decrease the amount of time they spend with us afterwards, what do they need to boost up their equipment so they can not just do introductory skills, but maybe some of those mid-level skills, and then we finish off the advanced skills. So we're looking at what's needed in every one of these core pathways so that that can happen from a curricular standpoint, a competency standpoint in each of those areas. So that is very exciting. And then the last thing I would like to say is the excitement is palpable. We know it's going to be a long road. A lot of curricular design and discussion will happen this fall. I really want to launch some of these classes in the spring, but we will really go for it ready to launch all these opportunity initiatives at each school district in a year from this fall. One of the other pieces that will be built into the curricular design that I mentioned is embedding the importance of why they need some of those courses at school. So say, for example, you have a student that's interested in construction trades. Maybe they're thinking a little engineering, I don't know, maybe CAD, maybe construction trades, and they're in a geometry class. So part of what we would like to do in this curricular design, again, that engagement piece, we don't want the student to think in their head, oh, I have to take geometry, I'm going to go to geometry today. What we want them to think is, or learn about their coursework, their base coursework is, I get to go to geometry today because I'm learning a concept today that I need in the construction industry. I get to go to this math class today because I am learning a concept that I need to go into welding or to go into auto. And same with some of the other core academic areas. Anywhere we can build engagement keeps that student on track to finish on time, will help graduation rates, help them enter the workforce. And that's what we both want from the K-12 side and from the college side. So that's a piece of this project that's very exciting.
Thank you. Any questions? I just want to say, so the conversations that Mr. Shaner alluded to last year, I called him and said, you know, when we were thinking about tuition waiver, to me, it's a larger umbrella question of how do we improve access to higher ed? So the question I had was about ACT scores. And I think we have the Hathaway Scholarship that's a promise to all of Wyoming children, as long as they take certain courses and get certain grades on their ACT and other tests like work keys. And so my initial assumption was maybe we just need to do more ACT prep offerings at the Fremont County schools. And so I just want to applaud you because I think the conversations you had with the districts was there isn't as much of an interest in those ACT prep. It's better, how do we better utilize the work keys to get those Hathaway dollars in the hands of Indigenous students? So I just want to say thank you for listening and doing the work of going out there and visiting with the districts. And Kathy, I think everything you're saying aligns with everything we've been talking about today. So for those of you who've been in and out of the room, I think this is a continuation. It isn't just K through 12. It's, K through graduating from community college or from the university. So thank you for all your work. Any questions from committee members? Please keep up all the good things you're doing. This is really exciting work. Any other comments or?
Madam Chair, I just can't say enough about the partnership with CWC and all the superintendents in the school districts. I mean, everybody just got together and got to work. It was pretty cool to be a part of that. So just want to put that out there.
Well, as you continue your work, if you see barriers in statute or regulation that need to be addressed, please keep us apprised. Thank you. Okay, committee, we're going to get there. How about we do a 10-minute bathroom break? We'll come back in at 11:23 and then we'll pick up the higher. I apologize. Any public comment on the K through 12 discussion? Lee. Mr. Spoonhunter, sorry about that.
Okay, again, Lee Spoonhunter, co-chairman of the Arapaho Tribe. Just to be really, I applaud the CWC and the school superintendents for working on the ACT and also the grade point average. We've heard from the legislative body from years now is that if there's no tuition waiver, you guys have the Hathaway Scholarship, as you've just discussed. And a lot of our students don't qualify for that. And there's two factors there. It's because the GPA and ACT. The Northern Arapaho Business Council this past week has met with Superintendent Degenfelder to discuss this and to push with the superintendents of our schools. And it's sad to not see District 25 here from Riverton because they have the highest population of Native American students in Fremont County. You would think it would be the reservation schools, but it's not. It's the neighboring city of Riverton who has the most Native American students. But we also talked to U.S. Wyoming Representative Congresswoman Harriet Hageman about this, and she's very concerned about the scores and about making sure, like you said, it's a work in progress from K all the way through higher education and receiving a degree, whether it's associate's, bachelor's. But the Northern Idaho Business Council is very committed, again, to working with the school districts, working with the superintendent, working with anyone we can so that we can get those GPA scores up. And then we can also get those ACT scores up. And I'm glad that CWC has done this outreach because the majority of our reservation students will go to CWC as a start. And whether they stay there because there's a 4-year degree offered there, or whether they transfer to the University of Wyoming or to outside universities, colleges, again, it is, we're committed as a tribe, Northern Apple tribe, to make sure that we build successful students. And we're doing our part as tribal leaders to help ensure that this process is getting streamlined. And so we just want to applaud everyone, sorry, for all the work they're doing, but it's a work in progress and we got a long ways to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Spoonhunter? Thank you, Vice Chairman. Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I just wanted to say that, make this clear that we did not invite 25. 25 has been here and has been participatory. We invited the 3 districts that were here because we're doing some follow-up from something from our last meeting. And I just want to be careful of anything that would go out that's unfair criticism and that 25 has interacted with us.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment on K through 12 before we close the topic, take a break, and then we'll jump into higher ed? Seeing none, thank you. We'll close this topic and we'll come back in at 11:27. The next topic on our agenda is higher education. We've heard from the Department of Education, and I just confirmed that they don't need to provide additional testimony. So I think what would make some best sense would be to have the University of Wyoming's team come to the table and present their information. Okay, gentlemen, and just in the interest of time, just be mindful, we are running like about an hour and a half behind on our agenda, so please present information, but if it's redundant, we'll ask you to move along. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. For the record, Mike Smith with the University of Wyoming. I just want to draw your attention real briefly and lay out what we're going to discuss pursuant to the request for data that we had from the committee. I provided this morning, with apologies for the bringing it to the meeting instead of providing ahead of time, 2 documents. The first has the yellow, blue, and green colored graph on it. And this is to replace the graph that you did receive electronically leading up to the meeting. There was a mistake in the data for the fall of 2021 in the electronic version we provided to LSO. And so I just want you to have the updated graph in your materials. I'm joined at the table by Kevin Carmen, our provost and executive vice president at the university, and Dr. Teresa Spoonhunter. Provost Carmen will use this second document that was provided this morning, which is the data on that chart I just described, but in a more user-friendly format. So the numbers shouldn't be new or different, but it kind of collects all this Hathaway and graduation data in one place. And again, LSO should have just handed it out this morning, but there are other copies I can bring to you real quick.
Madam Chair, I also had printed those as well, so they should be on your desk.
So again, apologies for that disorder, and but I'll turn it over. We do have some other folks that were listed on the agenda that couldn't end up coming. Hopefully, some of them are on Zoom. If you have questions, they'll be happy to address them if they're here. But mostly, I'll just turn it over to Kevin to walk through the graduation and Hathaway information that was requested that we provide. Thank you.
Madam Chair, thank you. Thank you, Mike. Yes, we'll walk you through some
For the record, can you introduce yourself, please?
Beg your pardon?
Can you
Introduce myself. I always forget that part. So I'm Kevin Carmen, and Provost and Executive Vice President at the University of Wyoming. Thank you. We'll walk you through some enrollment data for American Indian and Alaska Native students. You'll see some historical trends. If that first page of the graph shows historical trends of enrollments and as total enrollments at the university, it differentiates students who identify themselves as only American Indian or Alaska Native. That's the gold part of the bar, or the students who identifies as 2 or more races, including American Indian and Alaska Native. So you see the trend there. It's an increasing trend up through about the COVID period with the decline, and then relatively flat after that. I'm going to break down the 307 students who were enrolled in the fall of 23 and provided some additional information. So if you move to the next slide here with the horizontal bar, and apologies to those in the audience who don't have this. Of those 307 students, 193 identified as Wyoming undergrads, 52 were undergrad that were out of state, and 62 were graduate student or professional students. And I'll just note that 42 of those 62 identify as Wyoming residents that are graduate students. So we're going to then take those 193 students and break those down a bit more, and that's the next page with the pie chart and the information on the left side of the page. What you see is that of those 193 students, 63 of them are currently recipients of the Hathaway Scholarship. 45 of them previously had Hathaway scholarships and for one reason or another no longer receive the Hathaway scholarship. And then if you go on down the list, you see there are other categories such as 27 transfer students for whom eligibility was not provided. 19 students did not attending Wyoming High School and therefore are not eligible for Hathaway. I won't go through all of them, but there are various reasons why students may not have the Hathaway scholarship. But the bottom line is that 63 of the current 193 do have Hathaway scholarships. If you go to the next page with the blue and green horizontal bars, and we break this down a bit further. Of those 63 recipients, 28 of them are first-time students, or that's 78% of the first-time American Indian Alaska Native students who receive Hathaway scholarships. The next bar down, among transfer students, only one of the 29 transfer students receives the Hathaway scholarship. And then of the continuing students, 34 of the 128 continuing students are receiving the Hathaway scholarship. So that top half of the chart shows the Native students. If you go to the bottom chart, that shows the overall Hathaway distribution at the university. And you see that for first-time students, actually, it's exactly the same. 78% of first-time students receive the Hathaway scholarship, identical to Native students. But then you see a big difference, of course, with the transfer students. 30% of the transfer students receive the Hathaway, and 45% of the continuing students receive the Hathaway. So there's a very similar distribution for first-time students, but things change quite dramatically when we look at transfer and continuing students. And if we go to the next page, there's two horizontal brown and gold and green and blue bars. There are various levels
I'm
of
going to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Yes, please.
I'm having a hard time following along. I know you're moving fast because we're behind on our calendar, but I just can't impress enough. Like, it is so important to get us this information so we can read it and digest it and have our questions ready. I'm just scrambling to keep up.
Yeah.
We don't have colors.
And we don't have the colors.
I'm sorry. Okay.
So my question is, when you talk about those who received Hathaway versus those who don't receive Hathaway, do you have any data about, how many of these kids they start their freshman year, they receive the Hathaway and then complete all the way to graduation and get their degree? Is there a correlation? Like, I'm trying to understand this a little bit better of what's happening to these kids. Do they show up at the University of Wyoming, receive Hathaway, and then how many of them drop out, and then, but how many of them complete to graduation? Like, I don't know if that's covered in a future slide, but I want to just slow down just a little bit.
Sure. Well, sorry for the rapid pace. And I apologize again, didn't realize you didn't have the charts with colors. You have them now? Okay, colors are coming. So I will be, Madam Chair, I will be presenting information in this packet that has retention and graduation rates for Native versus the general population of the university. I don't have the specific breakdown as it relates to Hathaway recipients in terms of how that translates into retention and graduation. We do have information as it relates to student debt and the percentage of students who take out student debt to support their enrollment. But I'd be happy to try and provide that information and to get it back to you. I'm sure that we can parse that out.
Thank you. And what we're trying to understand is what's happening to Native students. And then along those lines, how successful they are. And in the education conversations we've had in the legislature, we're always asking about how many of your first-time students need remedial coursework. So anyway, a lot of questions, but continue.
And the remedial coursework is a critical issue in the process of student success for all students. I know that I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. We have President Tyndall and Vice President Wells here. We've had discussions with them about the issue of working to make sure that students, when they enter college, whether it's a community college or the university, are better prepared to be successful. And we know that there are some math issues in particular that are, and we know in higher education, that's the master variable in terms of student success, is whether or not they're going to be successful in math. And so they're very eager to work with us to address these issues in the reservation schools. So. So would you like me to continue? Yes, okay. Okay, so again, now that you have color, I'm sorry we didn't number these, but there's two horizontal bars here that show the different categories of Hathaway scholarships. So it isn't just a one size fits all with the same award regardless of your credentials. There's the highest level is the honors. The next is the performance level, then opportunity, and then the lowest level is the provisional. And those are for students who don't qualify for admission to the university, but go to community colleges and can transition to the university. So what you see is that even though the total percentage, as I showed on the previous page, of incoming students that receive the Hathaway is comparable to all incoming students at the university, the level of the awards are different, and that students, native students, receive a lower percentage of the highest level of the Hathaway. And more of those tend to be in the performance level. So they're getting less financial aid from the Hathaway on average than the average UW student is receiving. Okay, if we go to the next page, you'll see a graph, and I ask that we not cross your eyes on that one. If we just go to the next page where there's a graph, it summarizes that information. And so I'd like to walk you through this, and this relates to retention and graduation rates of first-time, full-time Wyoming resident students. So these are students who entered the university as freshmen, and we compare the American Indian Alaska Native students to the overall averages at the university. So the first bar on the left there is the percent retained from fall to spring. And so this is the number of students who continue on to their second semester. Obviously, retaining students at the institution is critical for their ultimate success. You see that about 85% of American Indian Alaska Native students are retained into their second semester. That's lower than the 92% overall institutional average. The real difference in my mind that begins to appear is when we look at the retained from fall to fall. These are the students who return for their second year or their sophomore year. And this is one of the most significant metrics that we in higher education follow, is getting students back for that second year is so critically important to their ultimate success. And here we see that approximately 1/3 of American Indian and Alaska Native students do not return for their second year, whereas overall institutionally, it's about approximately 1/5 of the students. I'm going to pause there and share a statistic that isn't on here, but just come from my own data mining on this, and that is that of those Native students who do return for their second year, approximately 80% of them graduate in 6 years, which is slightly above the institutional average. So there's a key factor here, getting students back to come back for that second year. There's a very high probability that they'll be successful if they do return for that second year. Obviously, if they don't return, if they drop out, they're not going to graduate. And so you begin to see that manifested in the last two sets of bars, to graduate in 4 years and to graduate in 6 years. And that simply shows that because a higher number of American Indian and Alaska Native students don't return and continue their education, logically, there's a lower number of those initial cohort of students that do that ultimately graduate. What isn't obvious by looking at those bars is that, again, if those students return for their second year, they're graduating at rates that are comparable to anybody else at the university. So getting them back for the second year is the real key that we're focused on. Questions about that? Yeah.
Senator Case? Oh, Senator Barlow, sorry about that.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. So Provost, thank you very much. So is there a correlation between returning second year to fall to fall and the award level? You had
the Hathaway?
Of the Hathaway. Is there any correlation, or is there any way you can draw a correlation in that? Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Provost Carmen?
Madam Chair, thank you, Senator Barlow. That's a really good question. If you were asking me to guess, I would say I bet that there is, but I don't have that information, and that's another bit of information that we could easily glean and provide back to the committee.
Okay, any other questions? Please continue.
Okay. Similarly, the next page, you see another chart with lots of numbers, but going to the next page after that, the bar chart, And this shows comparable information, but for transfer students. So not first-time full-time students, but freshmen, but transfer students. So these are students who have attended a community college. It doesn't necessarily mean they've received an associate degree, but they've started at another college, typically a community college. So again, you see the retained fall to spring, a little less difference there. They're pretty similar, 83 versus 86%. And then similarly, the fall to fall retention rates are comparable, 73 versus 75%. But we do see a drop off in the ultimate graduation rates. And with community college students, we assume on average that they're coming in with 2 years of education. So if they graduate in 2 years, that would be comparable to an incoming freshman graduating in 4 years. But we see relatively low completion rates for those students, 20% versus 31% of the institutional average. The gap is closed a bit by the 6-year graduation rate, 54 versus 62%. And then another bit of information that I want to make sure that is communicated is that if you see after that 6 years, so that would have after the 4 years, which would mean they've had 6 years of education, if they haven't graduated in 4 years as a transfer student at the university, they're very unlikely to graduate further. They're just, that's sort of the end of the road. They drop out and don't continue.
I have a question. Is it fair to say then that the kids that are, or the students that are having the most success in completing graduation are those that are transferring in versus those that graduate high school and immediately go to the University of Wyoming? Is that a fair conclusion?
I think that is a fair conclusion. There, again, as we saw there, and the numbers are larger as well. There are more students that come as transfer than as first-time freshmen. Even with that said, of those students who do come as freshmen and make it to their second year, they're quite successful, but they have a tougher time making that transition. And again, getting a bit ahead of myself, talking with the team at Central, we feel like it's imperative, based on the information that we have, to really focus on Native students doing that community college transition, focusing on them having that experience at particularly Central, and getting their feet on the ground and getting confidence that they can be successful, getting comfortable with being on a college campus, having us working with them while they're, that is us being the university, working closely with them to have them get comfortable with the idea that we want you to come to the university and there's a place for you here and there's resources, but not necessarily emphasize that all those students need to come in as freshmen. We think it's better for them to transition to the Central, the community colleges in general, but Central in particular. Okay. Okay, yes, I've gotten to the end of the data. I did want to emphasize, again, I've talked a bit about our burgeoning partnership with Central Wyoming College. Last fall, a team from UW came up to visit with President Tyndall and Vice President Wells and their team. They were very gracious. We talked about a lot of really meaty topics, and including how the Native Council Board at Central Wyoming College could work more closely with our Native Council, and so that we're having more robust dialogues around meaningful issues to address student success in higher education. We feel like we can do a lot more with our Native Summer Institute, which is a great program. It's a great way to get students on campus, on the UW campus, and getting them familiar with what we have to offer and how they fit in and what resources are available to them. I mentioned the science and math prep issue. We know that that's a critical impediment for students being successful, whether it be at Central or at UW. So being intentional about working with K-12 schools to help address those issues so that students come out prepared to be successful as opposed to behind the 8 ball from the start. We're also discussing the notion of having Central Wyoming College students be co-enrolled with the university. So as they come in, they're working with UW advisors and Central advisors to really develop that robust pathway so that they see their path to the university and understand from the beginning what they need to do, so that they're taking the courses that they need to take that will transfer toward the major that they want to pursue. So anyway, we're very excited with the opportunities to collaborate with Central, and we still have a lot of work to do, but but that is a current and robust collaboration that's going on. So with that, I would happy to entertain questions, Madam.
Questions for Mr. Carmen?
Well done.
It is. I have a couple of questions, and I don't know if you're the best suited person to respond, but we heard a presentation this morning that our tribes have approached the university about a tuition waiver in 2018. And, I think I'm getting caught a little flat-footed. There's a lot of things I think that were happening and conversations happening I'm unaware of. So I'm curious to know what the university's response is on, is that accurate? What have the conversations been? Is the university looking at providing some kind of free tuition? Just catch me up on what you know. And I have a couple other questions, but I think we need to start there.
Madam Chair, I know that this has been a topic of discussion in the past. It's was discussed, I believe, at the board retreat a couple of years ago, but the board has not taken action on this item. I believe that their perspective is that they feel that this would better be a legislative action as opposed to a board action. But I wasn't aware. There was a comment about recent discussions with individual trustees. I'm not aware of those. So I'm sorry, I can't provide more specifics for you.
Madam Chair,
Ms. Boone-Hunter?
the council was on the board last June in Lander, and they had brought up the tuition waiver again, and they had specifically, Councilwoman Brown had specific returns to board asked, well, what can we do to move this forward? And the Board of Trustees says, well, we have to form a committee. And she's like, well, who makes up the committee? And they said, well, 4 of the board people, but they didn't move forward on forming a committee for the tuition waiver.
Okay. I'm guessing you don't know the answer, but I am curious if that was ever communicated to the legislature that was where we're going to start pointing fingers.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I'm not sure about pointing fingers. I have not communicated with the legislature outside of this meeting last year on the data or information we provided on what various peer institutions do.
So along those lines, I guess that's my question, and I've asked for this before and I still haven't received it. We had a law student who prepared a very thorough and thoughtful memo. The thing that I want to know is for those universities that offer free tuition to Native students, how does that work? Was it set up by university endowments or was it set up by legislatures? I don't know that we've got a good understanding of that, and that's something I'd like to know. But along those lines, and I've communicated this to you as well, I think some universities in our country, it's a bit of a shell game, right? They'll say tuition is $50,000 a year. We'll give this student a scholarship for $25,000. So the student feels excited that they get such a great deal when the cost of delivering the education is significantly less even than $25,000. So it's, some of these larger institutions can kind of move those dollars around, and maybe that's the mechanism they use to offer things like free tuition to Native students. So I just get I don't understand how university funding works that way. And other universities that again offer this free tuition, I don't know if they offer similar things like the Hathaway Scholarship. So has anyone at the University of Wyoming, I've asked for it, has anyone at the University of Wyoming done some research that builds upon the memo that we got this morning and puts a finer point on some of those dollar questions?
Madam Chair, if I could, I've actually, in my office, we've done our own research on this. I've asked my assistant about a year ago to collect data on all 50 states and what they do in terms of tuition allowances for Native students. And I'll just say that it's all over the map. And in terms of how it's done, it's often like in Idaho, for example, each of their institutions do something different. So it isn't a statewide initiative necessarily. There are a few states that provide full tuition remission for Native students. You heard some discussion about the University of Nevada, Reno. I have to say with a little bit of pride that I was there before here and advocated for that and didn't get it, but sometimes you advocate and things come along later. So maybe I had a little bit to do with that. But only a handful of states provide full tuition remission for Native students. Probably the most common mode of tuition remission is, and you heard about this as well, is providing resident tuition for non-resident Native students. That doesn't do anything to help Wyoming native students who go to the University of Wyoming. So if we were to do that, it wouldn't help our own students. But there are examples of where there are private endowments that are used to support native students. But there really is, you can't just, it's very difficult to glean out because again, often it's on an institution by institution basis. There are and I also say in Nevada, it's not just the University of Nevada arena. That's a statewide policy that they have for native students. But again, it just varies highly from state to state, and it's easy to misunderstand and misinterpret that information, I think.
And then one last question, unless committee members want to jump in. You know, as a legislator, I think we can look at different options if we wanted to go down this path. You know, certainly if we were to take our colleagues a bill that said we're creating a new endowment, I just want to be very clear, that is a difficult thing to do. And feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, colleagues, because I could be wrong on that. But because the first question we'll ask is, well, we have Hathaway. How much are our kids utilizing the Hathaway Scholarship, the promise to all Wyoming children? And so that's where we're diving into these conversations about grades, performance, work keys, ACT scores. Like we're trying to figure out how to better do that. So we want to figure that piece out. And then we've also heard testimony about the endowments that exist for each tribe. And, you know, the utilization, how much is in those endowments. I mean, those will be the first things that we need to start sorting through. And so we did hear testimony this morning, a sentiment that fundraising at the university's foundation level maybe has neglected the tribal endowments. Are you in a capacity to speak on that? But that was a concern we heard this morning, and I do want to follow up on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think it would be accurate to say that the foundation is ignoring those endowments. I think that they're actively pursuing them. It's a matter of, you know, there's donor confidentiality, and so we can't always talk specifically about who we're talking with. But at the same time, there's no doubt that we could certainly use more. I will say that the endowments that we do have are well utilized. They are paid out every year and almost fully. There are a couple of endowments sometimes that are, I believe there's a couple of endowments that are restricted to particular areas of study. And if you don't have a student who's pursuing that particular area of study, then that endowment might not be paid out for a year or two until another student comes in that meets the requirements. But I don't think it's accurate to say that the foundation is ignoring this issue.
Thank you. A follow-up question, Representative Chestick.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and Provost Carmen. You heard me ask a question of the student, Ms. White Eagle, about whether the university had its own source of funding for these students. And she said there were some but she didn't have any data on that. Can you get us a report of some sort that would help document what funding is available for Native American students? I'm trying to get a big picture here. I mean, this is a very complex problem. And I want to have a complete idea of what's available and then where could we supplement or help out or whatever. But the data I need is what does the university do with its own dollars, or the foundation does with its own dollars.
Provost Carmen.
Madam Chair, Representative Chestick, yes, we can certainly get you that information, but maybe I can help clarify briefly here that as far as what is specifically targeted towards Native students, that's limited to those endowments that you heard about this evening or earlier this morning. But beyond that, students qualify for the Hathaway. They qualify for Pell grants and support. And then there's also the overall university scholarship matrix, the brown and gold matrix that all students qualify for. So again, aren't specific for Native students, but there certainly is financial support beyond the Hathaway and those endowments that are in the foundation.
Madam Chair. So
Ms. Spoonhunter.
I'm director of the High Plains American Indian Research Institute. So I deal a lot with the grants, and some of the students, I have an office in the Native Center. And so I have two student examples. So one student, she's graduating in kinesiology, but she works 40 hours a week. She does not receive Hathaway. She only got 500 of the Washakie endowment. And, to me, it's like, you're graduating, that's a miracle that you're finishing, being that she works all night at the nursing home, comes, takes classes, sleeps a little bit, goes back to work. And so she's an example. And then we had a transfer student from CWC who got partial Hathaway. She got the Woman in STEM from CWC, the transfer scholarship, but she still couldn't afford UW. And so she ended up going to United Tribes, and she has reached out and it's like, I think I want to come back. She's declared engineering. And so because I oversee a lot of the STEM grants, we're trying to figure out what funding do we have. A lot of our funding in Hapari is for graduate students, but we do support the ACES students in STEM. We have a USDA grant that supports just some of the giving these students experiences and USDA. But our students do have a high need. The Native Center has a few dollars scholarship. It's not a lot. I wouldn't say it's probably not over 10,000. Native American Studies has a couple scholarships, and sometimes the grants allow me to give, a couple $100 to a student. So we've combined resources. I think in our mentoring program, we've combined, and it's not just been from one source, to be able to help support a student that we mentor, either their STEM or they have a need. So.
Another question to help me understand. So when we're talking about the students that are graduating or even leaving school and not being able to afford it, are we assuming then that they don't take on any student debt? And I want to have this conversation about what an appropriate level of debt might be. I have kids on, college paths. We're having these conversations. And I think from my own just anecdotal experience, if a student has some skin in the game, has to take out a student loan, there's a little bit more of an incentive to say, I better take this semester seriously. And this is just anecdotal versus a student who says, I'm here for free. Maybe I don't need to take the semester that seriously because my tuition's covered. So, just two schools of thought. Can you talk to me if that's accurate, or talk to me a little bit about the ability of these students taking on student debt? So when you say they can't afford to be at UW, are we assuming that they're paying cash, or that they've taken out a loan, they're maxed out on whatever loan is eligible to them, and then they can't afford it? So I want to be clear on understanding what you're saying there.
Madam Chair, I do have some information just that I could summarize on student debt for American Indian and versus average students. So if you look at, these are data for students who graduate. So what debt do they have when they leave the university, when they graduate? And if you look at first-time, full-time freshmen, the average for UW, the average debt for those who have debt is $19.1 thousand. For Native students, it's $23.6 thousand. So there is somewhat higher debt. For Native students who have the Hathaway Scholarship, it's 19.7. So having the Hathaway Scholarship does help reduce that student debt. For transfer students, the average of all UW students, debt for those who have debt is 19.2 thousand. For Native students, it's 19.9 thousand. And for Native students with the Hathaway, it's 14,000. But I want to caution that those are based on some pretty small numbers that could be variable from year to year. In terms of the percentage of students who graduate with any debt at all, on average for the university for first-time, full-time students, it's at 40% that have any debt. For Native students, is 43%, and for Natives, interestingly, with Hathaway, it's slightly higher. It's 46%. So they have less debt, but there's more of them that are taking out smaller loans, if that makes sense. And then for transfer students, they tend to carry higher debt across the board. Transfer students overall have 51% of them have some debt. 59% of Native students have some debt, and 51% of students with Hathaway have some debt. Native students with Hathaway. So hopefully that's helpful.
Can you summarize that information and give it to us? I'd like to just
Sure.
really look at those numbers closely. And then do you have the percentage of how many of your American Indian students that graduate, how many of them have that debt versus how many of them don't? That would be helpful, I think, for us to know as well.
Yes, that was, sorry if I wasn't clear about that, but for the first-time, full-time freshmen, 43% of Native students have some debt, and versus that's overall, and 59% of transfer students have some debt.
Madam
A lot of
Chair,
numbers to absorb.
sorry to interrupt, but that was the one of the two documents we did provide in a timely manner. Again, apologies. And so this chart was included with your materials, and the provost was averaging those numbers together to make it more simplistic.
Thank you very much.
And
Sorry,
just to be clear, I did, those are 5-year averages that I just presented to you. So.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Spoonhunter, did you have any testimony or we concluding? Any questions from committee members? Seeing none, I appreciate your testimony. If you don't mind hanging out in case we have additional questions, that would be helpful. Thank you. If we could have representatives from Central Wyoming College take the stand. Yes. This one?
Oh, yeah.
Welcome and please introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. I am Brad Tyndall, president of Central Wyoming College, and I'd like to let's get the introductions out of the way. We basically we're going to keep this really abridged, teams, but I think you have our written packet, and so we're going to try to do this in a way that mostly presents very quickly, and if you have any questions. So I am Brad Tyndall, and to my right.
I'm Kathy Wells, Vice President for Academic Affairs.
Corey Daly, Vice President for Student Affairs.
Ivan Posey, Tribal Education.
Rory Tendor, Native American Student Service Coordinator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we'll try to keep this brief because you do have our written report, and I think you had it in advance. So we'll try to just kind of do a quick little summary and framing of this. So basically, our report had 4 areas to it. As you see, there was a student support and there's student success data, which I think is largely what you're trying to get at. There's a section on academic programming because obviously people take classes and the quality and the type of product matters. And then we have a section on the Institute of Tribal Learning. And the Institute of Tribal Learning really, the important thing I want to say, frames what we do. And so I think how we interact with the tribes is really, really important. So that's why we have largely Mr. Posey helping us in that regard. So under the Institute of Tribal Learning, we keep, in my mind anyhow, 2 things at forefront as we serve and meet the needs of the tribe. One of these principles is respecting sovereignty. And I do think that when you're working with 2 sovereign nations, that has to be at your forefront. It's not providing a service or student support to just to anybody. It's to 2 nations who have their own will and desire and their own sovereignty where they have to go. And so this Institute of Tribal Learning helps us frame that and do that always. And so Mr. Posey's position is half liaison actually, because how we do things, the how matters in serving tribes. So what does sovereignty really look like? It means a lot of relationship building in terms of getting permissions and having MOUs and doing things and trying to make sure that when we do research, it's done with the grace of the tribes. It means a lot of respect, partnership, and listening. So that's a really, really important thing to say. And I think with tribal members and being on the reservation itself, we need to always remember that. And the second thing that comes from the Institute of Tribal Learning in terms of how we frame all our academics and student support is a term that Ivan uses sometimes, is indigenizing, which is really making things relevant for the people and their desires. And so, and Ivan can speak to this, but I think you've heard a little about it before in other years' presentations. So under the Institute of Tribal Learning, we have things such as the Tribal Wisdom Society. It's just like, what is that? Is that a leadership program? Kind of, sort of, not really. It's something that's, designed for the tribes, for their economic development and nation building purposes. And so within this kind of indigenizing and listening space, we have the Wind River Advisory Committee, which Mr. Posey leads, through Dr. Spoonhunter, who used to work for us. They're really thinking in terms of traditional ecological knowledge, what information is most relevant to the place-based understanding of the people. So that's a big thing in sciences, and a very concrete thing to get your hand on there is, our new certificates in historical preservation. The tribes need some training on that, and we work with them to package that. So that's one piece. So So in terms of framing with sovereignty, it's respect, it's working, it's listening, it's being respectful, having agreements, and indigenizing things. And my second point of three is that we recognize very much that our work is really, really important. Because as you heard co-chair Lee, I got Spoon Hunter mentioned that education is the future. And so at the heart of our operation in our service area is what? The Wind River Indian Reservation. And so of course it's front of mind. And there are certainly opportunities and challenges there, but as Mr. Posey would say, who helps us frame this, we have the important role of good medicine. It's not only providing people with certificates and degrees, but it's really a healing type of thing. You're talking about healing nations, healing peoples, healing cultures. And so we really do take to heart the work that we do. It's very important to us at the college. In the history of our college, over the last 50 years, we've had over 6,000 Native American students. The impact that we can have with that is huge. Now we currently have around 350 at present, and that number fluctuates with semester to semester. So that's really, really important. And in terms of kind of the indigenizing things, the academic programming definitely impacts that. The big impetus for the state of Wyoming to do bachelor's degrees came from the tribes. And we see that Central Wyoming College serves over half of all the bachelor's of applied sciences for all the programs across the state. Why is that? Because the Wind River Reservation. 30% of our bachelor's student are Native American students from the Wind River Reservation. It is definitely meeting the need. And part of that is the tribal leadership degree. But not all of them are interested in becoming tribal leaders. The most common, I believe, the two most common degrees of the bachelor's level is teacher education, which is wonderful because growing your own teachers is huge, right? So that's really good news. And the other second big emphasis area for our tribal members is business startup. Another huge, strategically very important, because we'd like to see more shops across the reservation. So business startup entrepreneurship is huge. So the two most popular for our tribal members is teacher education and business startup entrepreneurship. So I think that this in a way is indigenizing or meeting the needs of the tribes in terms of what we do. And so overall, we do what we can. And maybe we could just spend a minute or two going down the row for people to update in their appropriate area. We have Student Support, Institute of Tribal Learning, we have academics, and we have student success and data right here. If we could do that fairly quickly, everybody, that'd be great.
Madam Chair, so the services I provide, if you'll look to page 2, that's actually my position we're discussing. I'm hired full-time. I provide support services to tribal students. Over the past year, just to summarize quickly, this year we've done a lot of work. My position in supporting resilience, trying to identify appropriate services, tribal programming, tribal partnerships that meet the needs of students currently dealing with issues that are impacting their ability to thrive at CWC. We know that representation matters, and we're very, very, very grateful for a lot of our higher education partners. We have a lot of mentorship that happens outside of the Central Wyoming College. Dr. Spoon Hunter, in particular, provides some mentorship to a lot of our female students. She does that on her own time and with her personal and family resources, and we're very grateful to the Spoon Hunter family for being available, helping us navigate some areas that a lot of our families who are supporting first-generation college students are learning to adjust to. I think on behalf of the students that I've spoken to over the past 2 weeks, just a lot of grateful conversations regarding people showing up for them. I'm a graduate of Fremont 14. I also did my student teaching at Wyoming Indian Schools. The philosophy of Fremont 14 has supported a lot of our tribal students who've transitioned to CWC. We have student teachers. One student currently in my mind who's graduating was able to meet with her elementary school teacher to develop her philosophy in education. What does that mean to her going into the field, and where does she see herself fitting into the dynamics of a classroom? And how does she bring her culture? How does she represent herself in those specific situations? And how does she share those experiences with students who look like her to be able to thrive and to be able to support them moving through education? So I think for my very quick summative comments, I wanted to provide that. And also, Lumina Fund had provided some support for the national study on the college affordability of Indigenous students. We have reviewed that information a number of times. Again, you know, college affordability, establishing a sense of academic community are the big takeaways from that report. But if you have time or opportunity, Lumina Foundation has done a really great job in supporting some of that data. Thank you.
Okay. Madam Chairman, President Tyndall pretty much gave a good overview of what I do. There's a few projects that I've been working on with the tribes.
And I apologize. Did you introduce yourself? I might have missed that. We did. That's right. Sorry. Please continue.
You ready? Okay. A couple years ago, we got approval to work on the IRB for the tribes, an institutional review board, something that the Wind River tribes don't have, you know, and it entails studies and research. And that's been a long process. I thought it would be done in a couple of years, but it actually hasn't. We're in a draft stage now, and that'll be hopefully done by spring of next year. I know we're talking about some partnerships with the local schools, and I met with the Fort Washakie School Board last month to talk about implementing a pilot project regarding cultural methods of teaching. You know, they was talking about the low scores and stuff this morning. And I think especially with math, those scores have historically been low for the last 30 years that I know of. And it may be a good effort to try to implement some of that for kids. I know there's curriculum and there's standards that schools need to go by, and it may be optional. But I think to make every student succeed, especially at the elementary level, we need to start there. I know once some students, when they come to Central Wyoming College, that's one of the subjects that they struggle with. I talked to Mark Nordine, one of our deans there, that's and we talked, that's probably the most subject that most of our tribal students struggle with. So I'm waiting to hear back from the school board. Deb Smith and Amanda LeClaire have agreed to work together. And so I presented to the board, and we'll see where that goes. But other than that, the Institute of Tribal Learning is mostly private funds. We probably raise 150 to 200,000 a year for our student services and community events that coordinate with the tribal community. But that's about all I have.
Senator Case?
Thank you. And Mr. Posey, welcome. I have kind of a question. In your responsibilities, do you connect with the dual enrollment students that might be younger students taking some college classes from CWC? And I don't know if that's I might speculate as to whether there's a higher percentage or lower percentage of Native American dual enrollment, but is that a success factor in student success? And is that something we could explore more?
Mr. Posey?
Yes, I think, Madam Chairman, Senator Case, I think that's something that's it's been beneficial, the dual enrollment you're talking about. And I think I talked to Matt Johnson, who runs our Boaches program, and there's some opportunities, I think, with Dr. Wells and I's discussion down the road here, how we could even enhance that through creating the institute in the summertime for CEUs and stuff for ongoing education for teachers. I think you see over the last few years that there's been a large turnover because of retirement. And so we have a lot of teachers that are more open-minded. You know, I don't know how else to say that, to new ways to learn. But I think Bochis is has been really beneficial, and I think we could only enhance that as we have further discussion.
Further questions? All righty, we'll continue on. Thank you.
Hi, Kathy Wells again. If I could just add to what Mr. Posey was saying regarding success factors of students, if they've engaged in doing concurrent versus those students who come to us who haven't. In general, we do see those students be more successful. They know what's required for the rigor of a college class. They come to CWC knowing they've successfully completed some college coursework, and that just gives them the leg up over students who haven't engaged in that college learning environment at all. So in general, if they do have some various levels of concurrent and dual credits already completed, they are typically more successful in completing their program of study. So you're welcome. So the majority of the section of my part in this presentation was already addressed with the partnerships and work that's happening with the Wyoming Department of Ed. The one thing that I do want to add to that, which ties to that project, your documents discuss one of our new program offerings that President Tyndall already referred to. It's been a long morning. With our Tribal Historic Preservation Officer certificates, several certificate offerings. We have had requests from a couple of the reservation schools inquiring if we can include that as part of our project with the Fremont County CTE initiative. So we're looking at ways to maybe fast track that and get those introductory courses offered as concurrent enrollment in the schools. And I know Eric Bennett, who is the CWC faculty member responsible for spearheading those programs, is very interested in getting those initial courses offered as concurrent enrollment. So that is one of the areas that we may be launching in some of the schools very soon. Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none, please continue.
Madam Chair, good morning. I wanted to focus on the student support aspect as well as student success. And so you have your charts in front of you that we provided. Before we go into those, I just wanted to mention we are a Native American serving non-tribal institution, which enables us to do expanded works to learn what works best. So one of the things that we're able to do is embedded tutors in the math classes, which has been pretty transformational. Faculty work very hard, but adding another body in the room to really be able to promote math success has been really helpful. In addition, one of the ways that we approach student support is kind of in a three-tiered system. So looking at partnerships outside of the college, how do we capitalize on those and make sure that our students are connected with resources that are available to them? Rory does a wonderful job with that, as does Lisa Applehans, who's in the back here. For CWC Wind River. And then what do we do systematically within the institution? So how do we address our policies and procedures? How do we make sure that we have the professional development required so that we are promoting success for our students? And then thirdly, on the individual basis. So one-to-one, what does that student need? For example, we have expanded our offerings in mental health services. We know that's a persistent need, and education as well as treatment. So we want to make sure that those are available to our students. So our data provided are two things to answer the questions that were asked in the memo. The first thing is related to specifically students from Wind River Reservation schools. So you'll note here, this is coming from Fort Washakie, Wyoming, Indian, Arapaho, and St. Stephen's schools on this chart on page 4. Those students receiving Hathaway who come specifically to CWC, you can see from 2018 to 2023, we have not had one get the honor scholarship. So that is depressing data. One thing that I wanted to point out, though, I have on the next chart how much money is involved at each of those layers, so you can see what they can get. The provisionals we are seeing consistently, and that is what Dr. Wells mentioned. We will be expanding with this partnership with CTE, those lower levels that they can take the work keys, they have another opportunity to access those funds. The ACT scores tend to be the barrier that we see with the students getting this, particularly those higher levels. So expanding access to more students is really important to us. As Dr. Wells mentioned, we also have a guaranteed match. So there is even more dollars available to them when they meet those eligibility requirements. But on the, beneath this chart of what the Hathaway dollars are, I pointed out that overall, so this chart, the bar chart is only showing particularly reservation students. And like we mentioned earlier, that does not include District 25 or District 1. So when we include all of those districts, our Hathaway participation is actually over what our overall Native student population is. So there's good news when we look at it from the broader perspective, but the specific data here is narrowed just specifically to the reservation schools. And then on the next section, we have our graduates. And I'm excited to add to this chart, we had our American Indian graduate celebration that Ivan hosted the other night, and we have 36 students we're expecting to graduate this year. So we're seeing those numbers continue to improve post-COVID, which we're very excited about. And then the charts below that are graduation rates, and they are broken down first-time, full-time, transfer students, and then part-time student graduation rates. I'm happy to take any questions. You'll see there's a persistent gap. We see that whether we're looking at success rates within the semester, success rates fall to fall, success rates for graduation. That's been a particular point for our strategic enrollment management team. So you can see these trend lines, they may be small trend lines that are going up, but the trend lines are headed in the right direction. And one of the things I'll point out as well is that these trend lines end at FY21 because it's a 3-year graduation rate. So we don't know the numbers for the next cohort yet. We do expect those trend lines to continue to grow. And I will stop there and see if anybody has any questions.
Questions from committee members? I have a question about student debt. I think the university gave us some good information about how much student debt students might be experiencing. Do you have any kind of similar data?
Not with me, but I can give you anecdotally, we have a broad range. We have a lot of students that graduate with no debt. And then we have some students who graduate with higher levels of debt. We have yet to run that data with our bachelor students. So we expect to change those dynamics, but we can certainly get you that information.
Any other questions for CWC? Thank you for putting this information together and for your presentation. We'll let you know if we have more questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Alrighty, committee members, it is 12:30. We're a little behind schedule. We could, we're going to take public comment on this topic and then need to think a little bit about lunch break. So I'll be having some sidebars with my colleagues. But is there any other public comment on the topic of higher education? Scotty? And just kind of come up here if you want to talk about higher education.
Good afternoon. My name is Scotty Ratliff, and I'm speaking just on my own behalf. One of the things that we heard was successful. Kale asked the question, does people taking dual enrollment help? As somebody that's been involved in education for a long time, oftentimes when students come to college, they do not have the responsibility of how to do something that they're assigned to do in the future. It's really discipline. How do I get this assignment turned in 2 weeks? They're in the habit of the teacher saying, okay, we're going to do this right now. So as they arrive at college and a professor says, I need you to turn this assignment in 3 weeks, it may as well be 3 years. It's just not the discipline thing. And so I hope that we won't take lightly the value in what goes on with dual and concurrent enrollment. It really is not so much what they teach, but how they're being taught. And the college kids that come with that kind of discipline of I can get my assignment in. I bet in the 25 years that I was at the college, they used to turn out in a midterm assessment of how each student was doing. My students, 99% was for attendance. They didn't show up or they didn't turn their assignments in. It had nothing to do with ability or IQ. It was the self-discipline. So if I was going to sit down with schools and say, how can I help these students? It would be giving them tools for their next step. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Ratliff? I would just add, one of the things that the Education Committee has worked on and looked at is just higher education attainment. And we've tried to tackle it in, looking at workforce, how do we provide financial support for people who are out of school, looking to reskill and retool. And it's really difficult when they're in the workforce and having families and jobs and mortgages and all of those commitments. So, one thing that we've tried to work on is how do we catch them when they're in those, going to school? And it's tough. I mean, making changes in, I think our education system is tough, but I think we heard one way that it's working a little bit better, maybe here in Fremont County than in other places. So your points are well taken. Committee, we need to maybe have some directives on the higher education topic. I don't see anyone else wanting to testify. Madam Co-Chair, did you have any thoughts?
I guess I wasn't, really ready for that. I guess just for discussion for the committee as far as we've taken a lot of information in, but as far as action, I guess I don't know, what is the committee's thoughts?
My thoughts, Senator Case?
Just in terms of timing, Madam Chairwoman, I wonder if we could maybe do this more at the close of the day. And the only reason I'm saying that is I know we got other agenda topics. We haven't figured out the lunch, and I know that people are here for those other agenda items. And, sometimes we come back and close on some of these issues. If that's okay. I mean, I don't want anybody to feel like we're skipping out on it.
Thank you. That's a good point. I would just add, I think we've got a little bit of a mixed message coming from the University of Wyoming. We had two different presenters with two different messages. I think there have been a lot of discussions. I just don't know what the position of the university is. I think we look to them for some leadership and guidance. And certainly if they want to make financial asks of the legislature, they're not shy to do that. So I think, my initial gut is we need to have some more outreach so we can better coordinate and figure out how we can support these students. But that's just my initial reaction. And I don't know where we go from there other than maybe drafting a letter and seeing if we can figure that out. But more to think on that maybe.
Strong letter to follow.
Strong letter to follow.
Well,
Senator Case.
Madam Chairwoman, I think we should give that some real thought. I think, the university takes a political beating in the legislature, and I feel that it's kind of unjustified. And they're kind of, and I think that colors our interactions with them. And we're so far away from the block grant idea in a lot of ways. So it must be really tough to run a university is what I think. And it must be really tough to have the resources and to deal with all different types of students. So I hope we can maybe take a deep breath and find something that works out. In a way, I don't blame the university, for example, for saying, this shouldn't have to be on our back. This should be the legislature. I actually don't blame that. I mean, so I might meet in the middle there, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. No, I think that's the question though, is if that's the ask for the legislature to take it on, then we need to know that, right? And I don't know that I've ever received that message, but maybe I've missed something. We'll think about the next directive on higher education, but for that it's closed. I think my co-chair and I discussed committee members, if it's appropriate and okay with you, we were thinking of doing a quick lunch over at the Heinz, 30 minutes, and then come back and just pick up with our agenda items and try and keep moving along with our day, if that sounds okay. Any objections or concerns, Senator Case?
I just point out to folks that I know there's people from solid waste and others. Heinz has a great deli. They really do a good job. There's good stuff you can grab to get us through. So it's a good plan.
Okay. Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. So I know that there are people here to testify. So if we're actually gonna, really try to stick by it. So coming back in at 1:05, half an hour from now. And then if you'll just allow us, we'll go grab food real quick. And we'll get started again in half hour.
We'll be back in at 1:05. Thanks.